It's official. Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States. However, the election is not over, as the balance of power in the House of Representatives is yet to be decided.
He did also win the national popular vote, a massive achievement. We'll be diving into all of that and what it means on The Nation Decides, starting now.
Just as I did in my first term, we had a great first term, a great first term. I will govern by a simple motto: promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises. Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again. And I'm asking
This is The Nation Decides Election Special. Here are Steve Lance and Tiffany Meier.
At the White House, where the 47th president of the United States, Donald Trump, will occupy in just a few short months in January.
We did have quite the long night last night, especially waiting over an hour for the former president and now president-elect to come out and give that, victory lap. While we were still waiting for some of those state results to come in, all the projections were that he was going to clinch that victory and surpass the 270 electoral college votes needed to really get that. And based on the numbers, he also won the national popular vote. Quite a upset, if you will.
He did, Tiffany, and right now we are awaiting Vice President Kamala Harris to give her concession speech scheduled for 4 p.m. We'll be keeping an eye on that. But before we do, let's dive deeper. Let's recap right now where things stand in the battleground states. Arizona, if you take a look there, it has still not been called. Former President Trump holding a lead, 11 electoral votes, 61% of the vote in. In the state of Nevada, also not called yet, former President Trump likely to take Nevada with 87% of the vote in. Michigan has been called for the former president, getting those 15 electoral votes in the Rust Belt for Michigan, 99% in. Wisconsin as well has been called for President Trump, 99% of the vote in. And as you can see, North Carolina was called earlier in the night with 99% in. The state of Georgia, also an earlier call last night, the battleground state there, those 16 electoral votes going to former President Trump with 98% of the vote in. In Pennsylvania, also called earlier in the evening, 19 of those electoral votes going to former President Trump. And right now we're going to go to NTD's Jack Bradley in just a moment. But first, let's go to Kevin Hogan at the data wall. This presidential election saw some big changes in voter preferences. That's very apparent along the southern border. Kevin, break down the numbers on this, revealing for us any shifts that you may have seen.
Yeah, Steve. So let's start in Texas, for example, to see how the voters have shifted from the last election until now. So if you go back to 2020, you see a lot of blue here down in this section of the southern border, and then that all shifts to red. So we're going to break down some of the numbers. Now we're going to look at all these border counties that actually touch the border. And for example, there's a few in here that actually don't have any border length, but they do have a point on the border, including Jeff Davis. So that's what you're looking at here, all these border counties. So we're going to just circle these really quick to show you the shift from the last election to this election. And it's been about a 20-point shift to former President Trump. So he's gaining a lot of ground here. That's pretty remarkable, considering that you have a lot of these counties are predominantly or majority Latino or Hispanic voters. And you can see, we'll drill down into a few of them. For example, this is Starr County right here. This is a very important county because it is almost entirely Hispanic, and it is about 97% Hispanic. And this county has gone with the Democrat the last couple election cycles, but you're going back 100 years that they haven't picked a Republican. And what happened in this election? In 2024, former President Trump flipped that, and with big margins. You see, he's carried this by about 16 points. So that's just one of the examples. In this whole sector, we're seeing a 20-point shift. Now, that's not necessarily new, this shift that we're seeing to the Republican among this group, because in 2016 to 2020, we saw the former president pick up about 18 points. So that's a total of 38 points that you're seeing shifting to the Republicans, all in this area of Texas. Now, in other border states, for example, New Mexico, we're going to zoom out a little bit to take a look at that. you're going to see not quite the same story, but something that is pretty revealing, that all in these border counties right here, former President Trump is gaining about, that's about 9 points. So he's definitely picking up a lot of support among these border counties here. So a similar trend that we're seeing in Texas, although not as pronounced. And then in Arizona, it's a little, you have some pretty populated counties along the border here. For example, Pima County, this is Tucson, and so forth. I'll give you an example. Former President Trump against Biden, it was about 18-point spread, and then with Harris, about 24. So this one doesn't exactly fit that curve. But overall, in Arizona, you see about a point shifting to former President Trump when you do the combined average of all these. We haven't really done the combined average for California yet. It has a couple border counties, San Diego County being one example, but we can drill down into it just to give you an idea. Back in 2020, Biden carried this by about 23 points, and then Harris, Trump was able to close that gap down to about 17 points, so about 8-point difference. And a similar story here in Imperial County. Again, we'll go back. This is about 24 points or so, and then Harris did not quite get that same spread, about 9 points. So again, all of these border counties, for the most part, are shifting to former President Trump. And I'd like to go into some other details that we have about these swing states, as to where exactly former President Trump was able to gain ground. We're going to go into North Carolina really quick. So this is the current totals that we have here, and we're going to take a look, for example, at where these high growth counties are. So you got Buncombe County, which is Asheville, Raleigh and their suburbs, and you got Pitt County over here, Charlotte area. These are high growth counties that grew about 5,000 people or more from the last election until now. And in all these counties, in a combined average, so they're concentrated right in this area right here, former President Trump was able to gain about 3 points, or let's say about 2 points in this area. So the big concern was that all these newcomers would come in and they would vote like their neighbors, because this area has been shifting blue, but what we saw was actually a reverse trend, that they shifted a little bit to the Republican side there. So we're just kind of carving up this state here to make sense of the different regions. So now you got Western North Carolina right here. So this is Trump country outside of Asheville. Again, really hit by Hurricane Helene, and our hearts go out to all the victims and their families from that hurricane, and hopefully everyone's able to rebuild there. But in that western portion of the state, you see former President Trump galvanizing his base and gaining about 1 point from last election until now. So really driving up those margins, part of the reason why he was able to carry this state again, now carrying it for the third time. And in the rest of the state, you see former President Trump picking up about a 5-point increase to his margin. So again, that's a lot of rural counties embedded in here, some suburbs and so on that are not high growth that are included in that. And then you have the Asheville area that has gone, let's just zoom in on that really quick. You're looking at Wake County right here. So again, this is Raleigh, this is the capital. So in that area, former President Trump picked up about a point. So he's increasing his margins from his performance against Biden, now comparing to Harris. And then in Asheville, this is one area in which Vice President Harris was able to gain a couple points. So that's about 4 points. But that's just not enough, obviously, to make the difference in the state. And then that's basically the breakdown of how former President Trump was able to perform so well in the swing state of North Carolina. Back to you, Steve.
Appreciate the update.
And of course, Pennsylvania, arguably the decisive state that helped Trump secure the presidency. Let's go now to NTD's Jack Bradley, who is there now. Jack, Pennsylvania was called for Trump in the midnight hours. How do the numbers compare to the last election?
Well, the numbers definitely improved here. I'm standing right here in front of the steps, the famous Rocky steps of Philadelphia, where Rocky ran up there and Rocky won, and a lot of people are doing the same behind me throughout the day. Now, as far as Vice President Kamala Harris, she held her last rally right here, right in front of the steps, and it was full of people, thousands of people, before heading over to her watch party over in D.C. Now, with 98% of the vote in, Trump has won Pennsylvania with just over a 2% margin. Now, Trump improved his margins in Philadelphia in 2020. Biden won it by 81% to Trump's 18%. This time, the county has voted nearly 79% for Harris and 20% for Trump. But over in Bucks County, this is the largest swing county in the state. It was heavily targeted by the Trump campaign. Trump won this county, Bucks County, by 0.1% rather, making it the first time to vote for a Republican presidential candidate since 1988, 35 years for George H.W. Bush. Back to you.
And Jack, it's not just the presidency. Talk to us about the down-ballot races and what we're seeing in Pennsylvania.
Right. So a very important race was the Senator Bob Casey race, where he was fighting to secure a fourth term. But it looks like his Republican challenger, Dave McCormick, is coming out on top there with just 0.5 percentage points, 98% of the votes in. But he's the projected winner there. Now, that, of course, is going to really help. The Republicans already have a majority in the Senate, but even more so now. And now, as far as the House races, it seems very evenly split between Republicans and Democrats, with Republicans flipping some of the Democrat House seats. Tiff?
All right, Jack, in Pennsylvania for us. Thank you for those updates.
And of course, the other big story this election is the balance of power in the House and Senate. NTD's Luis Martinez is in D.C. to tell us where things stand. Luis, take it away.
Let's go and look at the Senate first and where we're standing. As of now, Republicans can have 52 seats in the Senate of the 100 and Democrats only 44. That gives them control. We're still waiting. Republicans, as Jack just mentioned, are hoping to clinch Pennsylvania, 98% of the votes. Dave McCormick atop of Bob Casey, very small different. The margins of minimal differences. The state of Nevada is still in play. We still don't have final results. 85% of the votes in. Very interesting here, Sam Brown, who ran in 2022 in the primaries and lost to Republican Adam Laxalt, is running again for a Senate seat in Nevada. Now the other Senate seat that was up for re-election this cycle. And all throughout the campaign season, Jack Brown in the state of Nevada, Sam Brown in the state of Nevada was behind in the polls of incumbent Jackie Rosen. So that's probably Trump being in the ballot and pushing him over. But we'll see, of course, after we have the final results. We're also looking for the results in Arizona. We still don't have a clear picture. Only 61% of the votes counted. Ruben Gallego, Democratic congressman running against Kari Lake, is winning so far. The margins are smaller than the polls indicated before November 6th. Ruben Gallego was 6 points clear before November 6th. We're seeing here only a 3-point difference, and 39% of the votes still need to be counted. So control of the Senate for Republicans. And Steve, Tiffany, very interesting this election season. We also mentioned that Michigan was called for Democrats. Congresswoman Elisa Slotkin filling in the seat that Debbie Stabenow is leaving open after retiring. And Wisconsin as well, Tammy Baldwin defeating the Republican counterpart. Now, these two states are interesting because, as we can see here in the Senate balance of power, they're marked blue. But if we go at the presidential race for 2024, we can see that both in the states of Michigan and Wisconsin elected former President Donald Trump. So there was some ticket splitting in Michigan and Wisconsin. And as far as the vote count goes in Arizona, as we can see, former President Donald Trump is leading in the vote count in Arizona. But then Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego is leading in the senatorial race. Now, let's look at what the House balance of power looks like. Remember, the magic number for the House is 218. Right now, we can see right here, Republicans have secured at least 200 of those seats. Democrats, 183. Democrats needed to flip some of the seats in California. Let's look at those really quickly. There's 5 races in the state of California that flipped Republican in 2022. Democrats needed to flip back to the blue side in order to regain control of the House. That's not happening with 52% of the votes. John Duarte in California's 13 is leading. David Valadao in California's 22nd is leading. If we go down here to District 40 of California, Young Kim is leading. So the Republicans in California are holding the line. And lastly, Steve, Tiffany, where Democrats did make some important gains was in the state of New York, where they flipped the 4th district seat right here. Anthony Desposito lost to Laura Gillen. And then also in New York's 22nd district, John Mannion bested the incumbent Brandon Williams. So that's how we're standing right now, the balance of power. House is still in play. Democrats are not flipping the seats that they need to in California thus far, but still we don't have the final results. Back to you.
Thank you, Luis. We'll be checking back in with you in a moment.
And in the meantime, we do have an excellent panel of guests here with us at the desk. Javier Palomares, founder and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Business Council and former advisor to the Obama and McCain's campaigns. Democratic strategist Theron Bond, Gerard Filitti, political strategist and senior counsel at the Lawfare Project, and of course, retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gomb. He's the co-founder of Restore Liberty and county chairman of the Republican Central Committee in Montana. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris is expected to give her concession speech at any minute now, so we'll go to that as soon as she does start beginning. To our panel, though, Javier, welcome. Good to have you here with us. What is your read of Harris not speaking last night and then speaking today?
Well, you know, I had hoped that she would have spoken. Literally thousands of people showed up in person to hear her. Obviously, they thought they were going to hear something else. But at the end of the day, I would have hoped that she would have stepped up to the moment and said, hey, listen, this has happened. This needs to be the right kind of transition, and address the crowd that adoringly was there for her. Disappointed that that didn't happen, but I'm looking forward to what she has to say now.
And Theron, you were here with us last night. We heard former President Trump's speech. In terms of Harris's speech today or tonight, depending on what time we're looking at right now, what are you expecting or hoping for in her speech?
Well, I hope, one, she explains to the American public why she's taken so long to do this. This has been almost a full 24 hours since all those hopefuls arrived at Howard University to hear from her. And they deserve to hear from her. Those are her supporters. A lot of them were her voters, her phone bankers, her canvassers. And so they showed up for her, and I was surely hoping that she would show up for them. I get it. I've had clients, and I haven't won them all. They haven't won them all. And the hardest thing they had to do was call and concede, get up in front of the public and say, we didn't quite hit the mark this time. But I think she should have. I think she should have done it, and now it's going to be a little lackluster, and that will be a part of her legacy. So I'm hoping that she will restore hope in the American public, and I hope she gives us something to be inspired by. But who knows?
And Gerard, you were also here with us all night. We're seeing news that, New York AG Letitia James might be continuing her case against former President Trump, even if, he is now the president-elect. How do you see the legal cases panning out?
The legal cases in state court will probably be stayed at some level. They will not be proceeding with Trump as sitting president. That's not something that's likely to happen. Whether they're dismissed pending refiling when he's no longer president, or there's some tolling agreement to wait it out, I expect that the charges will remain. The federal cases are pretty much dead. We've seen Jack Smith taking steps this afternoon to wind down the prosecutions. He understands that the Justice Department is not going to support the prosecutions once Trump is in office. So the question there is really how he does that.
And Darren, back to Harris's expected speech here, a lot of people are talking about the 2020 election and then, if you will, the furthering divisiveness that we saw the country with Trump winning the popular vote. We're also looking at some of those numbers coming in. He's captured quite a diverse makeup. Do you see the nation healing after this transfer of power?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think there are choices to be made by all the different groups and different allegiances to decide whether or not unity is really in the cards, and that'll be up to them. What'll be critical is Kamala's speech coming up here. The message, I believe, has already been heard by her delaying this long. Most of the people have realized that she went behind the curtain and didn't show up for 24 hours. That's a pretty critical message to her base and to Americans in general. Now, the next piece has to be President Trump saying, okay, I'm president of all American people, and he becomes the critical unifier, because at this point the Democrat Party is accurately described as a rudderless ship. The Republican Party is looking like it's got a huge mandate across all levels of government, and they have to execute that, but they have to do it in a way that America comes together and is made stronger together.
And Javier, to that point, I want to get your thoughts on some of the numbers that we saw being broken down in Texas. There's also been various exit polls that show the shift in the Latino vote, also the black vote, significantly increasing for former President Trump. We saw that Starr County in Texas You're from Texas.
I'm from there.
Oh, no kidding.
I'm from the Rio Grande Valley.
So you can tell us
Hidalgo County.
what's going on in Stark County.
You know, first of all, you know, the scary part for me as a Democrat is as I look at the hold that the Democratic Party had on the Hispanic community. In 2016, Hillary Clinton got about 40% of the Hispanic vote overall. In 2020, Joe Biden got about 30% of the Hispanic vote overall. In 2024, Vice President Harris got 8% of the Hispanic vote. That is a precipitous fall in a direction that nobody saw coming. I remember in 2016, despite a bombastic opening set of remarks when he came down the escalator, Donald Trump got 29% of the Hispanic vote. I was blown away. And then in 2020, he got, I believe, 35% of the Hispanic vote. And last night, I think he got something like 45% of Hispanic. I predicted he'd get 46% Hispanic vote. He got 45% Hispanic vote. I mean, this is unbelievable to me, to be watching this. And what it says to me, Steve, is that the Hispanic community, like all communities in this country, we're worried about the kitchen table issues. You know, it's hard to focus on abortion or identity politics or gender splits when you can't pay the rent, when the light bill has gone up 39%, when the gas bill's gone up 28%, when rent has gone up 15% and your salary's still flat. It's really hard to talk about those idealistic things when you can't make ends meet. And I think they saw in Donald Trump an opportunity to maybe fix those issues. And at the end of the day, it's about taking care of the family, taking care of the issues at hand. It's not about celebrities. It's not about identity politics. It's not about any of that. It's about who's going to help me solve my problems here and now, my opinion.
And right now we do have a clip of the Vice President's motorcade arriving to the area where she's going to be giving the speech. From what I understand, that's at Howard University, as you can see right there on the screen, which means that she will be speaking likely any minute. That's just from moments ago. Theron, I would like to get your thoughts as we continue to watch here. What part of President Trump's message do you think is resonating with minority voters right now?
I would say that, and Democrats aren't going to like this, but it's the truth. Donald Trump gave people hope that Democrats were trying to create this election cycle. Donald Trump made people feel like if you vote for him, you're going to have more money in the bank. You're gonna be able to feed your family. You're going to be able to get a good job just like everyone else you know in your community. He really made people feel like he was there for them. Now, if we'll see reflections of that in his administration, when he actually starts to put forth his policies, that has yet to be determined. But in the moments of his campaign, that's what he did. He said what people wanted to hear. He made people feel what he needed them to feel, and he was unapologetic about how he did that. People can appreciate a bold, courageous leader even if they don't like what they have to say.
And right now we can see their Governor Tim Walz on camera at the speech location, at the venue where Vice President Harris will be conceding in this race. That was obviously her candidate, her vice presidential choice. There is some discussion. Well, he's there on the screen. I guess we could go over to Darren and just say, in hindsight, of course, hindsight's 2020. Do you think there's any regrets on this choice? There was discussion as to whether or not she should have went with Shapiro.
Yeah, I think there are regrets on this choice. I don't know that you're going to get it admitted to very frequently, and some of the reasons potentially why. But if I could go back to what Theron was mentioning in some of the demographic pieces, there's a key demographic that we really haven't been able to discuss very much yet that doesn't rely on race.
We're going to have to pause right now. Vice President Kamala Harris is about to take the podium.
And this is at Howard University in Washington, D.C. That is the location where the rally was as well last night, the watch party.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So let me say, and I love you back. And I love you back. So let me say, my heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. To my beloved Doug and our family, I love you so very much. To President Biden and Dr. Biden, thank you for your faith and support. To Governor Walz and the Walz family, I know your service to our nation will continue. And to my extraordinary team, to the volunteers who gave so much of themselves, to the poll workers and the local election officials, I thank you all. Look, I am so proud of the race we ran, and the way we ran it, over the 107 days of this campaign. We have been intentional about building community and building coalitions, bringing people together from every walk of life and background, united by love of country with enthusiasm and joy in our fight for America's future. And we did it with the knowledge that we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Now, I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny. And anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time, in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. And loyalty to our conscience and to our God. My allegiance to all three is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation. the ideals that reflect America at our best. That is a fight I will never give up. I will never give up the fight for a future where Americans can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the freedom to make decisions about their own body and not have their government telling them what to do. We will never give up the fight to protect our schools and our streets from gun violence. And America, we will never give up the fight for our democracy, for the rule of law, for equal justice, and for the sacred idea that every one of us, no matter who we are or where we start out, has certain fundamental rights and freedoms that must be respected and upheld. And we will continue to wage this fight in the voting booth, in the courts, and in the public square. And we will also wage it in quieter ways, in how we live our lives, by treating one another with kindness and respect, by looking in the face of a stranger and seeing a neighbor, by always using our strength to lift people up, to fight for the dignity that all people deserve. The fight for our freedom will take hard work, but like I always say, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And the fight for our country is always worth it. It is always worth it. To the young people who are watching, it is, I love you. To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed, but please know it's going to be okay. On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. That doesn't mean we won't win. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power. And don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before. You have the capacity to do extraordinary good in the world. And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. This is a time to organize, to mobilize, and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together. Look, many of you know I started out as a prosecutor, and throughout my career, I saw people at some of the worst times in their lives. People who had suffered great harm and great pain, and yet found within themselves the strength and the courage and the resolve to take the stand, to take a stand, to fight for justice, to fight for themselves, to fight for others. So let their courage be our inspiration. Let their determination be our charge. And I'll close with this. There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here's the thing, America, if it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion of stars. The light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service. And may that work guide us, even in the face of setbacks, toward the extraordinary promise of the United States of America. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. I thank you all.
And there you have Vice President Harris giving her concession speech at Howard University, joined right now by the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, her husband, right there as they sign off. And, you know, pretty conciliatory. You know, I sensed a lot of humility in her speech. Darren, feel free to comment and pick up where we left off. What were your takeaways from what she had to say?
Yeah, Steve, I wrote down a bunch of words that kind of stuck out to me because it seems like in this speech she attempted to identify with those words, but then actually functioned in the opposite. And that's, I think, what rung hollow to a lot of people who listen to this, who have been watching them and her in action for 4 years. We hear her invoke God and the Constitution, but she's advocating actually for overturning big parts of the Constitution, stacking the Supreme Court. This has been an extremely anti-faith administration in all of their actions, talking about the youth and their dreams and their aspirations and their goals, while also at the same time you have their inability to buy a house, maybe get a job, and the inflation. It's all these things that keep coming up as the top issues in the electorate today that drove this election in general. And you hear her talk about how the government shouldn't be able to tell you what to do, but she's been in big favor of enforcing all kinds of things that are anti-medical freedom and personal freedom across the board. So it may have been somewhat conciliatory in her mind, but to those who've been watching the administration for a while there, it certainly rings hollow. And it tells, all she really did was give a stump speech and tell her people to keep fighting, but for what?
Well, I think it's clear that those things that you're pointing out obviously didn't resonate, otherwise the results could have been different. But Gerard, the fact that she did say that we must accept the results of the election and engage in a peaceful transfer of power, how important was it to send that message to her supporters?
That was completely unnecessary to say. That was a barb at Donald Trump, especially when she repeated it a number of times throughout that speech. What struck me most is, well, the word that comes to mind is doublespeak. This was not conciliatory, this was not graceful, this was fight, fight, fight. If Donald Trump had come out and given that speech, he'd have prosecutors knocking at his door. The fact is, she had an opportunity to unify. She started the speech by trying to unify, but then she went off and did what she needed to do, which is say fight. There's no unity there. This is a message of fighting, and this is the last speech she will likely give as a politician. So it's really disappointing that she didn't do a better job of conveying a grace to the people that we have to come together as a people, no matter who is president, no matter whether we agree with policy, we are one country united. She didn't do that.
Karen, your reaction?
I think this is hands down the best speech that she has given her entire political career. And I've been very critical of her as a strategist, as I am of all candidates, regardless of party and who I'm in favor of. I think the greatest thing that she told people was that don't ever let someone tell you it's impossible because you haven't seen it done before. That's inspiration. It meant something for her to be a black woman as the official Democratic nominee running for president. We have never seen a black woman, let alone a woman of any ethnicity, be the leader of the free world. We've not seen it. And so there will be people that look up to her as a person, regardless of her policy, her background. Somebody will look at that television screen and say, I can do it because she tried. She was able to do it because Shirley Chisholm tried first. And so we have to continue that. I don't know that there are many people that look up at the screen and say, I want to be like Donald Trump. And so what she did was she did inspire the hope. But I think if she had treated her entire campaign like she did in these 15 or 20 minutes, we might see a different result this election cycle.
Javier?
Yeah, I have to agree with Theron. I think had she had that approach to her campaign, it might have been a different outcome. First, the good part of this, she talked about the light of the America's promise. She talked about a peaceful transition, a little bit of a barb, but at least she went out of her way to mention a peaceful transition. She talked about the light of truth and optimism and service. And to her credit, unlike Donald Trump, she stuck to the script. She went 11 minutes and she stopped at 11 minutes. So credit where credit is due. With all of that said, the glaring issue, in fact, to me is, the Harris campaign raised over $1 billion. They outraised their opponents by over $500 million. And they had the endorsements of Lady Gaga, of Julia Roberts, of George Clooney, of LeBron James, of Taylor Swift, of Oprah Winfrey, of Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and the list goes on. And you still lost. And you lost decidedly. Something was missing. They wanted a vibe. They wanted identity politics. And Trump was speaking something totally different. And I have to admit, as a Democrat, Trump hit the mark and she missed it.
And right now we do have some projections to make in just a moment. Harris said that in her call, let's see here, we are projecting the vice president to win the state of Maine. She is projected to win Maine. Only 2 electoral votes coming out of Maine, a more unique state there with 91% counting. And in Michigan, in the Senate race there, we are projecting Alyssa Slotkin to win that race with 99% of the vote in. And in the state of Wisconsin Senate race, Tammy Baldwin is projected to win over Eric Hovde. And there is the map as the Electoral College stands right now. 292 electoral votes for former president or President-elect Trump now, and 226 for Vice President Harris. As you can see, things are still filling in. You do have Alaska, Arizona, Nevada, and with those Senate wins, it brings the Democratic total to 44 seats. Former President Trump's White House comeback buoying investors and drawing congratulations from around the globe. Both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris also calling to congratulate him. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao, who's outside of Trump's Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. Iris, what is Trump doing today after clinching the presidency?
Good evening to you, Steve. After taking a victory lap last night after winning the presidency, Trump spent today hunkering down at his estate at Mar-a-Lago, taking a lot of calls from world leaders, CEOs, as well as from the current administration. Vice President Kamala Harris called him earlier today to officially concede the 2024 election and also to congratulate Trump on his win. And Trump's campaign says in a statement that Trump, in return, acknowledged Harris on her strength, professionalism, and tenacity throughout the campaign, and that both leaders agreed on the importance of unifying the country. And meanwhile, President Biden also called Trump earlier today to congratulate him and also offered him to visit the White House. The White House says President Biden emphasized the need for a smooth transition, ensuring the smooth transition, and also emphasized the importance of working to bring unity to the country. Meanwhile, unity was a key in Trump's victory speech last night at the watch party, which we were at. And Trump emphasized that he will heal the country through success. Here's what he said. Watch.
We're going to help our country heal. It's time to put the divisions of the past 4 years behind us. It's time to unite. And we're going to try, we have to try, and it's going to happen. Success will bring us together. I've seen that.
And Trump today also took calls from a lot of world leaders, including leaders across Europe, including Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who called Trump to congratulate him and says that he appreciates Trump's peace through strength approach, adding that that will bring peace closer to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was also among the first to call Trump, and he says afterwards that Trump's return to the White House will offer a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and America. And the CEOs of Apple, Meta, Google, Amazon also called Trump to congratulate him while also showing their eagerness to work with Trump's incoming administration. Steve.
Trump last night vowing to unite the country and fix all the problems that are facing the nation. What can we expect in the coming months as he prepares for his next presidency?
So now, as president-elect, Trump will now enter a 2-month-long transition period where he'll be busy, really, to interview and select his incoming members of his cabinet as well as his bigger administration. We also know that Trump will carry out this process along with his transition team, which is already in place. And also, his campaign says that Trump will implement his agenda once he gets into the White House. We know that on the campaign trail, Trump has promised a lot of actions on issues including the border and the economy. On the border, he promised to launch the biggest deportation movement in U.S. history in targeting illegal immigrants, especially those who have committed crimes in the U.S. And he also has vowed to, for example, to impose a heavy tariff on Mexico if the country does not offer help in that regard. And on the economy, Trump also vowed to cut tax for corporations producing here in the U.S., as well as impose heavy tariffs on products that are being imported to the U.S. And all that is to encourage manufacturing here, right in the USA. He's also vowed to eliminate, for example, tax on tips, tax on Social Security benefits, as well as to lower energy costs for everyday Americans by expanding oil drilling. So a lot on his agenda that he has vowed to really push forward, but a lot of them actually also needs help from Congress. We know that the House majority right now is still too close to call, but having that both House and Senate majority will really help Trump get all the green lights he might potentially need to push forward his agenda. But of course, that question might be resolved in the coming days. Steve.
And today's Iris Tao live in Palm Beach. Thank you, Iris. And bringing the discussion now back to our panel. Gerard, I want to just circle back to the Vice President's concession speech that we just heard. There was kind of a mutual feeling that it may have been sort of barbed and targeted toward Trump when it came to her saying that we must accept the results. But on the flip side, I think there were a lot of folks that felt as though there could be a certain level of civil unrest that might follow, depending on who was elected. Do you think that if there was something in the making, there could still be something in the making, that this will serve to sort of lower the temperature amongst those who are really dead set against former President Trump?
I think that fears of civil unrest were always to some extent exaggerated. I think that we see much more unwillingness of people to be as extreme as they were what happened on January 6th. I think that we have all been mindful of this election to try not to get to that point. So hearing Kamala talk about that peaceful transition, it repeats all the worst and negative campaigning. It's not really meant or designed to calm an atmosphere which is already calm. There's no one threatening insurrection. There's no one threatening violence. There's no one threatening or protesting the outcome of the election. So there's no need for her to go down that path. She could just be a unifier. To his credit, Trump did give a good speech about unifying. This is an opportunity for her to offer herself as an intermediary, as a conduit. I will help President Trump transition. I will help unify, to put herself out there. But she didn't do that. She went down the fight, fight, fight line. And while that might sound great to her base, that's also not unifying. And especially, one last point, especially when she convincingly lost the election, not just the Electoral College vote, but the popular vote. So it's not about fight, it's about let's figure out how we can work together.
On the unity side, we are hearing reports that President Biden has called Trump, inviting him to visit the White House. Kind of funny because Trump used to live in the White House and will be in the future. What do you make of that stance, Javier, where you're maybe seeing, these two former adversaries, if you will, both political, running for the same White House? What do you make of that?
Well, I would venture to say it was probably a very quick call. Probably not a lot of jokes shared back and forth. But it is, what I would expect of President Biden. Elegance and a willingness to extend in peace, the hand and say, you've won. It's my role now to concede that, come visit your soon-to-be residents, or once again to be residents. So I was delighted to hear that he did that. I thought that was a class act, and it's classic Joe Biden, in my opinion.
And I think we have to commend President Joe Biden and Vice President Harris, because they did what President-elect Donald Trump couldn't do 4 years ago. For so long, there were these stop the steal, election deniers. We got fight from President-elect Donald Trump. And so when we talk about setting the tone, everything about her was calm and it was peaceful. She didn't encourage people to go do anything. She didn't encourage them to stand back and stand by. She encouraged them to maintain peace and try to be hopeful about the future. She did the exact opposite of what we saw for now President-elect Donald Trump. And I think she deserves some kudos for that. She could have taken this a totally different route, but she chose not to. And I would hope that President-elect Donald Trump would see that and acknowledge that. And I hope that we see that during the 4 years of his presidency.
We are seeing from Stephen Chung, the Trump campaign communications director, that after this call, or during the call with Vice President Kamala Harris ahead of her speech right now, that Trump congratulated, acknowledged that Vice President Harris for her strength, professionalism, and tenacity throughout the campaign. This was a very short, condensed campaign that she inherited. And both leaders agreed on the importance of unifying the country. So given the speeches we've heard so far and maybe the messaging there, Darren, what is your hope in terms of this unifying message that we are hearing both sides saying they want to do?
Well, my first hope is that that goes from words to actions. And that would be wonderful to see across the country. But at this point, what I really, really, truly want to see is Donald Trump's plan put into action and coming out with the names of here's who I want to appoint to cabinet positions. I simply want to move forward with the clear and obvious mandate that President-elect Trump has received from the American people in large numbers. And that's the risk the Republican Party has, given the House, the Senate, and the White House and the popular vote, is if they don't do something with that they've been handed, then that's a great risk to Republicans. If he uses it to enact his mandate and fulfill the promises that he's already made and he's promised to continue to fulfill, that's what I really truly want to see. We have to move beyond this now because we really do not have time.
There will be a lot of focus on what now President-elect Trump does in his administration now that the Republicans also have the Senate. We're still waiting on the results on the House there. We've heard, a lot of talks about potentially getting libertarians into certain positions, the likes of RFK Jr., potential health appointment, all of these different aspects. In terms of the minority diversity aspect that you were talking about last night, Theron, what would you like to see in terms of these cabinet positions?
Well, I know I don't want to see RFK Jr. A lot of other people would be negotiable. I'd like to see some Latino folks in his administration, and this is with decision-making power. Not just some low-level job where they're just on the books to fill a quota. I would like to see Latinos be included. I would like to see Asian Americans be included. I would like to see Black folks, Gen Z, millennials. I would like to see an array of representation that he says he has now brought into the fold with this election cycle. I would like to see that represented in his administration. If he's truly about unity, that's what he will do. If he wants to rave about the Black vote that he acquired now, show us. Prove it to us. Give us some representation within your administration that will speak to our issues, that can work together with him to get things passed that will help our respective communities.
And Javier, speak to us about the Hispanic community and also the small business community. What would you like to see under Trump?
I have no doubt that he will appoint minorities and underrepresented communities in his cabinet. Already, I've had a couple of discussions with members, congressional members that are already kind of being named, being bantered around, and that's an exciting thing for me to hear. I have no doubt that he will, in fact, pepper his administration with plenty of diversity. I remember being at this very desk during the RNC and making a comment that I was very enthused over the diversity that I saw at the RNC. I saw African American community being represented. I saw the Jewish community represented. I saw, the Hispanic community represented. So I'm hopeful that that continues. From what I'm hearing inside the campaign, there have been plenty of Latinos around the campaign and advising the campaign. So I'm delighted to see that. I look for, I'm hopeful, and I look for what happens now with Ted Cruz, what happens with Marco Rubio, who I think are both prime and certainly prepared and capable. And there are going to be other names that I can't think of right now. In terms of just overall where he goes from here. I've known a Donald Trump that, in fact, has had African-American friends, has had Hispanic friends all around him. I've had the opportunity to, collaborate with him and with his daughter. And I found the family to be more than willing to listen to me as a Hispanic and known Democrat. So I don't think there's an issue necessarily about that. It remains to be seen, but I'm not as doubtful. I believe that there will be some diversity in this administration.
An important discussion, and we'll have a lot more. But first, before we go to a quick commercial break, we have a follow-up on those projections we made earlier in the Senate. Democrats now have 44 seats, while Republicans have 52 seats. There are still 4 more Senate races yet to call. And coming up, NTD's Chris Bob is standing by in Michigan, which Trump won by over 1 percentage point. So stay with us. We'll have a lot more for you when we come back.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic MyPillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen-size MyPillow for just $18.88. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
This is such a gentle painting, so beautifully portrayed.
A group of people reading together in this simple, everyday-looking living room. A young girl reading along with an adult, a grandparent sitting in the lotus position, a businessman in his typical suit.
You see all those people, they look like they have quietly settled down there. And you, as a viewer, it looks like you've just stepped in the door.
You can't see what it is they're reading, so you're a little bit curious and you're kind of invited to walk in.
This harmonious feeling is not by accident. It is the very subject of the work. The book they are reading is the main text of Falun Gong, which is an ancient Chinese spiritual discipline in the Buddhist tradition. At the core of Falun Gong are the values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Unfortunately, the practice is banned in China, where the artist resides. Thousands have been killed for their faith. Golden energy blooms into the room as a result of their steadfast faith. The painting on the back wall reminds us of this work's title, Plum Blossoms in a Muddy World.
It's also a metaphor for the practitioners that are sitting in the room as plum blossoms.
They signify perseverance and hope that all brutal winters end and life is renewed once again.
The magical painting.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness.
And welcome back to NTD's 2024 election analysis. NTD's Chris Bobb is joining us live from Michigan. That's a state that Trump won by a little over 1 percentage point. Chris, you were ready to come on air last night, right when Trump was about to deliver his victory speech. Now, the Michigan Secretary of State had said yesterday that her state could be the first battleground state to report results. What happened there?
Yes, I was waiting to report something from Huntington Place when the president-elect was about to speak, so I'll fill you in now. So around 11 o'clock last night, I was at Huntington Place from about 3:30 p.m. to about 2:30 a.m. At 11 o'clock, the Secretary of State from Michigan, Jocelyn Benson, came out to give a pep talk to all of the workers there tabulating the ballots. She told the media after that about 94% of the ballots that were received earlier than Election Day were already finished. They were just waiting on a lot of shipments from places where the ballots, the signatures had to be checked. So people were waiting there. I remember we got an update around 2 a.m. that there was another truckload. It was being delayed. They were sending over stuff early. So there was a lot of confusion. She did fill me in about some of the reasons why there were delays. I think we have a clip I've recorded from my iPhone. Can we go to that?
The vast majority of ballots in Michigan have already been tabulated, but there's still a few, and some counties may be waiting to get all of the numbers before posting anything. I see. And that might be so they have to. That's interesting. Yeah, it's up to them. They can do partial results. They can, every county clerk can decide what and when to report out, and that's the sort of human aspect of this process. But the tabulation itself is mostly done. I see. And so, Detroit.
So these clerks have a lot of discretion. They can choose whether or not to report some information that they receive early or to hold. Today, Jocelyn Benson had a press conference a few hours ago. At that conference, she also noted that there were some problems uploading the data to the websites for clerks as well. So there was a couple of challenges that led to the delay.
And Chris, you have been following the Arab American vote in Michigan closely. Looking at the data that we do have so far, what insights have you found there?
Yeah, so there's in Wayne County, like I said yesterday while I was at the tabulation center, there's the highest volume of Arab American voters anywhere in that county in Michigan. So in three cities in Michigan, there is the largest amount of Arab American voters. They're in Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck. I do not have data from Hamtramck yet. Remember, that's the place where the mayor, who is a Democrat, endorsed Trump. But I do have data from Dearborn Heights and from Dearborn, from the city clerks. Donald Trump won both. So, and Jill Stein could be part of the reason for that. She received 15% and 18%. Kamala Harris about 38 and 36 for those two locales, but Trump over 42% in each of them. So we can see that there was definitely some traction there as a result of the current administration's handling of the war in Gaza and the reaction from the Arab American community there.
All right, Chris, out there in Michigan for us, thank you for those updates. And now we'll be bringing it back in studio here to our excellent guests who are waiting with us. Gerard, I want to start with you. You and I have talked about what's happening in the Middle East multiple times. Given those results that we just saw coming out of Michigan and what our reporter just laid out there, especially when it came to the Arab American community, Muslim community, and that Jill Stein was actually sneaking into second place in some of those counties. How are you reading that and how the Middle East conflicts played into this election?
First, I think Jill Stein was a protest vote more than the first choice of a lot of these voters. But I think the Middle East absolutely plays a role. And we have to remember, no community is a monolith. The Arab American community, the Muslim American community is not voting in block for one person or another. There are different interests and different priorities, just as there are people among them who support Gaza and the Palestinian cause. There are some who want an end to Islamofascism and want America to have a stronger relationship with Israel in order to keep Iran at bay. So this is not block voting. It never has been. But I think the Middle East absolutely played a huge role in this election because it showed two different visions. It showed America committed to its ally, Israel, in the form of Donald Trump, and it showed someone who was somewhat prevaricating on where they stood in supporting Israel and the lengths they would go to appease American voters in Kamala Harris.
And actually, I'm sorry. I think that if their sentiments around voting for President-elect Donald Trump were centered around the war, it would be because he said, I will end the war, or these things wouldn't have happened. And so many people that are of Muslim American descent living here, obviously, they want the war to end. So if they heard he's going to end the war, then they would be inclined to vote according to somebody who has shown some form of a solid effort to do so. And that's something that Vice President Harris didn't do well.
And Javier, how are you reading what happened in Michigan? I think many were thinking that state would go to Harris, would be pretty safe potentially for the Democratic side. What happened there?
You know, it's hard to call it. If you think about it, 48 of the 50 states shifted to the right. I've never heard of that before. This is a phenomenal, and I think we're going to be unearthing little factoids like that in the next week or so. But to me, just to think about the fact that 48 of our 50 states shifted to the Republican Party, that's huge. And places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, I think people just assumed that was going to go in one direction, and they didn't.
I think, to your point, Javier, your state of Texas, the Senate race there, Ted Cruz, it seemed as though Allred was closing in on him, and Ted Cruz was getting nervous. And, now you're looking at it, it's almost roughly a 9% spread. What do you make of that race?
There's a couple of things about Ted, and I have to admit, as a Democrat, I was openly for Ted Cruz. I went on the bus with Ted Cruz. I'm 1,000% behind Ted Cruz.
Why?
Because he has been amazing for the American small business community. And he has been that way for over a dozen years, literally collaborating with me over time. And you don't forget your friends just because Colin Allred has shown up with $110 million in his pocket. As attractive as that was, my loyalty lies with the man who stuck with me and my community, and Ted Cruz had that track record. So I got to tell you that. But, not only did he win, he won decidedly. And I come back always to this thing that we discussed off camera, Steve. The polls rarely look at rural communities. And if you consider Texas, it's 90% rural. We always look at Houston, we look at Dallas, we look at Austin, we look at San Antonio. But Texas is predominantly rural. And in the rural communities, it's Republican country. And Texas is Trump country. And Trump country is Ted country. I mean, that's just the way it is in Texas. I'm not surprised he won. I thought he would win, but I didn't think he would win so decidedly.
And Darren, your state, where you're from, of Montana, had another very interesting Senate race. You had the long-term John Tester incumbent losing by roughly the same margin that Ted Cruz won by, nearly 9 percentage points. Give us a feeling of what was going on in Montana.
Sure. Well, first of all, Montana's had this weird history with its Senate races where if one's a Democrat, the other one's going to be a Republican, and they've rotated like that for many years. Ultimately, what has happened, and underneath the change that Trump brought to not only the nation, but to Montana specifically, people have really looked at voting records. And John Tester was tied tightly to Obama and Biden and fully supported their agenda all the way through, and the people saw the results of that. And so it was pretty easy to identify someone to come in and run against John Tester, who would be the complete opposite of him. Montanans saw that, and Tim Sheehy walked away with a very clear victory and frankly, an individual mandate in a state also, by the way, that is roughly 13% veteran of the 1.1 million or so of people that we have. And him being a veteran carried a lot of weight.
Really great discussion here. We are going to take a very quick break, but stay tuned, because now that the results of the presidential race are mostly in, a big question still remains. Did polls underestimate President-elect Trump's support like they did the first 2 times he ran? NTD's data election analyst, Kevin Hogan, has the story in just a moment.
Nearly 1 in 4 U.S. consumers have been a victim of identity theft, even when they did all the right things to protect their personal information.
I did everything right, but an institution that had my data didn't, and now my identity's been stolen.
Banks, hospitals, employers, and other institutions all have your personal information too, and when they're exposed, careful monitoring of your accounts and credit won't be enough.
I change my passwords all the time. I shred my documents. I thought I was bulletproof, honestly.
I was on the hook for a $75,000 loan I didn't take out.
The information thieves need to steal your identity is already in the hands of others, and it only takes one vulnerability in one place to put your identity at risk.
Let me make this very, very clear. You could do nothing wrong, be perfect about all of your security, and still be a victim of identity theft.
Tens of thousands of my hard-earned money gone.
The stakes are high, and even if you take steps to protect your personal information, you're not the only one who has it. Only LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points every second, alerting you to the widest volume of threats others could miss, far beyond what you could possibly monitor on your own. Like someone trying to use your social security number to open a loan, purchase a home in your name, or even take over your investment accounts.
The alerts I get from LifeLock are super simple. Was this you? Yes or no?
And if you become a victim, a dedicated U.S.-based identity restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed. All LifeLock members are backed by the LifeLock $1 Million Protection Package, including reimbursement for stolen funds.
There was a letter from LifeLock with a check for over $81,000. They made me whole.
Call now or go online and use promo code GET35 to save 35% off an annual plan for your first year. All plans include a 60-day money-back guarantee. Call 1-800-598-0995 or visit lifelock.com/get35 to save 35% on your first year. Enroll now.
My name is Ken Mears. I'm the founder of Great HealthWorks, the makers of Omega XL. Those of you who are searching to address your aches and pains, Omega XL is for you.
I'd wake up in the morning and my hands would be swollen. When I went out to feed the animals, I was in a lot of pain. And to not be able to do the things that you enjoy, it was depressing.
Joint pain due to inflammation affects so many of us. Omega XL is natural, effective, and drug-free, and it has been shown in clinical research to help reduce pain due to inflammation.
You don't need to live in pain. Inflammation is controllable, it can be managed, and it's fixable.
I can work all day with my hands without being in a lot of pain. What a way to feel great with Omega XL.
Call now or go to omegaxl.com/direct. Buy 1 bottle of Omega XL, get 1 free. That's 2 bottles for only $39.95. Order right now and we'll also include a bottle of Vitamin XL D3 absolutely free on your first order. Act now.
And welcome back to NTD's 2024 election analysis. I'm here at the data wall with NTD's Kevin Hogan. Kevin, the media polls, they vastly underestimated former President Trump twice, 2016, 2020. As the results continue to come in right now with this decisive victory, what is that telling us about how the media polled him this time around?
Well, they did it a third time. They underpolled Trump a third time. That's the short answer. The long answer is a lot more complicated. It wasn't quite as pronounced as a Trump underestimation effect, and I'll tell you what I mean. So what I'm doing here is I'm averaging Real Clear Politics and 538 polling average across 2016 and 2020 to show you how much Trump was underestimated. That's the green number right here. So he was underestimated 6 points in Wisconsin, and that's part of the reason why everyone was so surprised when he beat former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton back in 2016, because the polls had him down a lot and her up. So, and then that was 4 points of an underestimation of Trump in Michigan, and that's an average of 2016 and 2020. Same story here in Pennsylvania, 4 points. And then in North Carolina, it was 3 points, 1 point in Georgia, and 3 points in Florida. That's not really a swing state in these elections, but I'll put it there for reference. We'll just hold on to that. Now, in this election, here's what happens. So this is the yellow number, real clear polling in 538, how much Trump was underestimated in those state level polls. And that is 2 points in Wisconsin, 2 points in Michigan, 2 points in Pennsylvania, 2 points in North Carolina, 1 point in Georgia, and 5 points in Florida. So what that means is you see all these yellow numbers, they're all positive. That means that Trump was underestimated on average in all of those states. It's just that the yellow numbers are smaller than the green numbers, meaning that this election, the underestimation wasn't quite as pronounced as previous elections. So, but you still see that. And again, in some states like this, they're very close. So if 2 points off in the polls can give you a vastly different answer than what actually happens. So now, and then you look at Florida, this is just to show you that that Trump underestimation is not just happening in these key battlegrounds that everyone's looking at. It's happening there, but it's also happening in other states around the country. We haven't crunched the numbers all over the states yet because it's just so fresh. We're just getting a handle on some of these. You can imagine there's probably going to be some research papers that compile all this and get a better understanding. But the problem is that there's the shy Trump voter effect. So Trump voters across the last 8 years just don't really want to tell people who they're voting for all that much on average, and that includes pollsters. So pollsters have what's called a non-response bias when they just can't pick up that Trump support. A couple reasons. Trump voters just don't pick up the phone, and then another reason, they just don't want to talk to pollsters because either they believe Trump when he says that they're fake polls, so they want nothing to do with them, or they don't want anyone to know who they're voting for. So that's a big problem. And then just recently, before the election, the chief political analyst, Nate Cohn at the New York Times, he wrote that he said that these final polls, white Democrats were 16% likelier to respond than white Republicans. So he said, it's raised the possibility that polls could underestimate Trump again this time around. And he says they do a lot to account for this, but there's just no guarantees. And that's what you're seeing consistently across the board, these underestimation of Trump. And again, it's happening a third time.
And so, Kevin, we see what's going on in what looks like the east coast of the country. There's a few states on the west coast that have not been called yet, but are still very interesting as they play out. What are you seeing in states like Nevada and Arizona?
Right, so we're going to go out west, and what we have here is about 61% of the votes in Arizona, so there's still actually a lot to call. Again, this would just be a bonus if former President Trump picks it up, or just in the bag if Harris picks it up, because she's not going to the White House next January. So now we're going to look at where former President Trump did well. Here in Arizona, it's really important to look at the most populated county, and that is Maricopa County. This is the Phoenix area right here. So former President Trump, from last election to this election, was able to increase his margins about 4 or 5 points, just about 4 or 5. So that's a big bonus because, again, you have such a populated area here. I'll just highlight a different county so you can see that a little bit more. So 4 points here in Maricopa County. Again, very important. Now, when you carve this state up a little bit more, you see that there is the Native American country right here. So you got Apache, Navajo tribes, really predominant, and then you got Cochise County, or you got,
Still quite a few votes still to come in in Maricopa.
Yes, that is right, actually. Yeah, you only have 65%, so kind of similar with the state as a whole. But now, even in, for example, the Apache County, you only got 50%. But in this area, former President Trump was he was not quite doing as well. Or actually, in this area, he did do better. So he got about a 4-point margin increase from his matchup against Biden, now with Harris. So things shifting a little bit to the Republican side there. And then also in Tucson area, that's where he didn't have quite the best. So we're going down to Pima County right here. Harris was able to pick up about 2 points. So that's a pretty populated area, giving her a little bit of a boost. But then overall in the rest of the state, you see former President Trump picking up about 6 points overall. So those combined margin increases were definitely what have helped him get this lead. Again, we haven't called this race, but as it stands right now, former President Trump is up about 4 or 5 points. So we're going to keep tracking that really closely. Another one is, for example, Nevada. This is one of the last states to be called here. And again, 85% of the vote, so a little bit more than Arizona. But when you look at this, there's a key battleground, and that's Washoe County. So this is Reno. And you see Biden carried this by about 4 points back in 2020, but Trump turned that around against Harris, and he actually carried it by about 2 points. So that's a big shift there. So that's one of the reasons why he's able to take the state, and just a really much better performance cutting into Harris's margins in Las Vegas. That's Clark County. Back to you guys at the desk.
And fascinating discussion there with Kevin as he broke down all of the data. I guess the big question is, Gerard, when it comes to the media underpolling Trump, is it just kind of Trump is an enigma? Or is it something more like another black eye, like we saw the New York Times wrote to their viewers and their readers back in 2016 for a really kind of misguided or misapproach to Trump's coverage?
Well, I think that what we're seeing this cycle is somewhat better polling, more accounting for those people who don't identify that they are Trump supporters or voters. I think ultimately what happens is that the media fuels this distrust in polls, because when you have when you have elected officials, when you have former electeds calling Donald Trump and his supporters deplorables, talking about them trying to destroy democracy, calling them garbage, you don't want to go to a poll station and say, I'm voting for this man. It's virtue signaling. And that has been a problem with Donald Trump from day one. The media has not been kind to him. The mainstream media has not been kind to him. And that is very much reflected in the polls because a lot of people are afraid to speak their minds. And we saw this election as well. People who did consider abortion an important issue, people who would normally vote for the left, came out and voted for Donald Trump, and they never told anyone.
Darren, you are a strategist, a Democratic strategist. You understand polls, and I'm really curious what your take is on the polling this cycle.
For a while, it was going back and forth, and obviously the ultimate poll happened yesterday. I think yesterday was election day, yeah. And so I think at one point it had him leading, and then at another point it had him behind, and then after the unfortunate first assassination attempt, then it went up a little bit because people felt a certain way. People felt sorry for him. People were concerned. And so people a lot of times vote on their emotions. And I think that had a lot to do with that polling. But simultaneously, Vice President Harris wasn't taking the opportunity to lift her own percentage points. She wasn't giving people more. She wasn't giving people clarity. So despite what people thought President-elect Trump represented, despite his harmful rhetoric, it still didn't mean that people were motivated to go vote for her. And we saw that reflected in the polls and ultimately now in the next president of the United States.
Javier, I think to Gerard's point that the polling was more accurate, I think that is true because depending on what polls you look at, when you look at the averages, you had some of the more maybe right-leaning or centrist polling, but that more what you would consider left-leaning media, when you look at a lot of their polls, I won't name names here, they didn't really have Trump up too much. Right. Is that a little bit curious?
I think Trump has taught us all a lot of lessons here. The last time I was here, I talked about the fact that I learned two important lessons in 2016. One, don't ever trust the polls again. You can poll for what you want, and pollsters are generally lazy. They're not going to go out of their way to find, that rural community where there isn't the propensity of people. They're not going to call 3 or 4 or 5 times to the same number to get that stubborn person to answer. They're going to go to the quickest responses they can get. And generally, those are people who have something to say. So there's that aspect of it. I think, though, to Gerard's point, I agree. This time around, remember back in Hillary days, not a single poll had him anywhere in sight. I mean, he was basically non-existent in the polls then. This time around, I saw polls back and forth, and it was a tight race. I mean, it was a tight race. So I have to give credit where credit is due. But at the end of the day, the second thing I learned, in 2016 is never underestimate Donald Trump. He's done it again. He's done it again.
Darren, speaking of the polls too, in 2022 for the midterms, we were promised this red wave. Now, if we're looking at the balance of power, we're still waiting on the House, but we are seeing more of that red wave, if you will. Why didn't that happen in 2020 and 2022? What's changed since then?
Well, I guess I want to go back to identifying one key demographic that we really haven't talked to too much here, and I haven't seen addressed in a lot of other outlets either. And that is, I think we needed 2 more years to see certain things, and that demographic that needed to see it was the faith community, specifically the evangelical vote. We haven't seen that really highlighted. And coming from an evangelical side, a faith community side, and a pastoral side of things, a lot of that community looks at just surely the Democrat platform and saw that magnified to where they were the anti-faith, the DEI, all the different pieces that were working against people who come from my faith background, and by the way, also Muslim faith backgrounds and others, that I think when this is all said and done and the analysis is complete, I'd like to see if we know the answer to the question of all the pastors across this nation that have stepped up and called the faith community to the polls. That could be a significant change.
To your point, we're seeing, early reporting still coming in terms of New York, a lot of massive Jewish turnout for the Republican side. A lot of those margins were quite high for the Republicans and very blue New York. It is live TV. Anything can happen here.
Sorry.
Given some of those narrow.
All right, we're awake. Just in case we're wondering if he's watching.
Given some of the narrowing, if you will, obviously New York still went to. Kamala Harris would have been quite the upset if it had turned red. But some of those narrower margins we're also seeing in those House races in California, where a lot of those seats stayed red. It wasn't flipped back to the blue. How are you reading that there and what it means for the Democratic Party going forward?
We have to look at all of the states and tagging on to what Darren said. I think by and large we know that typically evangelical Christians lean conservative, very, very, very conservative. But in some of the southern states, we have Southern Baptists. And so we have the black church circuit, and Vice President Harris navigated some of that. And so I think it's just navigated differently. I think we typically associate evangelical Christians with the Republican Party, and we typically associate a significant portion of the Baptist church community, which also falls under the Christian denomination, with democratic values. But I think ultimately what really sold people, it's not even, let's say, President Trump-elect. It's not even Vice President Harris had she been elected. It's about the language and the messaging that was used. It could have been anybody at this table saying, I can make sure you have more money in your bank account. I can make sure you can fill your refrigerator again and you not break the bank to do so. And that person would have won the White House. And that's what we saw happen. And so I think based on different taxes that different states have, those things influence who you vote for as well, because that determines whether you pay 5% here or 7.25 somewhere else. You may be feeling it sooner than others, and they reflected that in their vote. They voted for the person who they believe could put more money in their pockets. And unfortunately, that wasn't the message that Vice President Harris was selling to them in a way.
And if I could, I spent a lot of time over the last few months talking to my dear friend Abraham Enriquez. Abraham leads an organization called Bienvenidos, which is a faith-based Hispanic organization. He is close to the Trump campaign, and he has assured me all along that Trump was going to win. And I think one of the things that I noticed, at least in the Hispanic community, is that the Trump campaign never went away. They had a ground game even when he wasn't in office. They were reaching out to the Hispanic community and certainly to the Hispanic faith-based community. And Abraham would be the first one to tell you, it's like he never left. And so I think what we saw here was a paying back of, hey, thanks for the attention, we're with you. And I think the rest, kind of the numbers speak for themselves.
I do want to dig more into the economy, but first we do have to take a very quick break. After the break, NTD's Luis Martinez will bring us the latest on the House races, where the balance of power is still up in the air. So stay with us. We'll have a lot more with more analysis in just a few minutes. And you're looking at a live look at the Congress there. We're looking at D.C. That is the Capitol, where balance of power is at stake. So a lot more for you. In just a few minutes, we'll be back with our special election coverage, so stay with us.
Will radical lies determine your child's future, or will timeless truths? Fathom the Good equips children with wisdom against the world. Our homeschool curriculum teaches high schoolers to think critically. We provide primary texts, original content, reasoning tools and mentoring videos to help them transform America. Teach your children to navigate the world's woke confusion. Teach them to fathom the good.
Hi, Mike Huckabee here. Having spent many years in politics, I can comfortably say that the current climate is enough to keep any of us awake at night. And I safeguard my well-being by making sure that I get a good night's rest with Relaxium Sleep, America's #1 trusted sleep aid.
I'm Dr. Eric Siliberti, founder of Relaxium, America's most trusted sleep aid.
Just like you're seeing me on television now, I saw a commercial for Relaxium Sleep back then. I called, and the rest is history.
When I take Relaxium Sleep, I sleep better than I have in years.
I wake up feeling like I've had the best night's sleep.
As a clinical neurologist, I know how essential sleep is for building and nourishing both your mental and physical health.
Relaxium Sleep is made in the USA, has no risk of dependency, and is drug-free. It's also the only sleep aid with Valarest as part of its triple-action formula.
I developed Relaxium to help my patients fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and wake up refreshed.
Relaxium Sleep worked from the very first night I took it.
You've got to try Relaxium Sleep for yourself, because once you do, you'll be a customer for life, just like me. And right now, you can try it for free.
For nearly 2 decades now, Relaxium Sleep has been changing millions of lives.
Take Relaxium Sleep. I promise you it'll work.
If you're experiencing sleepless nights or tossing and turning, you need to try Relaxium Sleep now.
I trust Relaxium Sleep, and so should you. Get the best night of sleep guaranteed. Don't wait another minute. Call now.
Mike Huckabee is so confident that Relaxium Sleep will work for you, he's asked us to give away another 1,000 bottles. Get your free bottle of Relaxium Sleep now. Visit tryrelaxium.com or call 800-431-6032. That's tryrelaxium.com or call 800-431-6032.
Come to Mathis Home Furniture Superstore and save with Black Friday deals. We have the largest selection of bedrooms with the styles you like at prices you'll love. Like this queen platform bed covered in a velvet fabric and 2 matching nightstands. You get the bed and nightstands just $359. They're all in stock now, so you get fast delivery absolutely free. For style and value, shop Black Friday deals at California's Furniture Superstore, Mathis Home.
And welcome back to NTD's 2024 election analysis. The balance of power is still undecided in the House. So let's go now to NTD's Luis Martinez to give us the latest in the battle there. Luis, take it away.
Of course, let's look at how we're looking at things, the balance of power in the House of Representatives. As of now, we have Republicans with 204. So we've seen from the last time we checked this board, 4 seats going to Republicans and 2 seats extra going to Democrats that are, as of now, at 186. The magic number, 218, to get to that majority. Let's remember that in the 118th Congress, the one that is in session right now, Republicans hold 222, so they still have a ways to go and several seats to defend. But let's look at those seats that are still in play, the ones that we're waiting for the results. Let's go first to the state of Arizona. We are still waiting for the results there in the presidential race and also in the senatorial race. And in the House, we know that Juan Cisco Manny, who is the Republican incumbent of the 6th District of Arizona, with 57% of the votes in, is trailing behind Kirsten Engel. So that looks, as of now, with only 56% of the votes in, that it will flip to the Democrats' side. Eli Crane defending his seat, District 2nd, with a healthy margin of over 5 points in the state of Arizona. And then in the 1st district, we have David Schweikert defending his seat, 60% of the votes in, only 1 percentage point above the Democratic counterpart. This was one of the toss-ups that Democrats needed to flip in order to reach control of the House. There's 5 races in California that are still waiting to be called. 4 of them right now are the Republicans are holding onto those races. Only one of them has turned blue. If we go to the state of Washington, we're still waiting for the final tally on the 3rd district right there. This is a rematch from 2022. 2022 when Marie Glueson-Compares defeated Joe Kent by 2,800 votes. Right now, 59% of the votes. It seems like it's going to be a repeat of that result in 2022 with a Democratic victory. Now, also interesting to mention, we're waiting for the final tally here in Nebraska. Don Bacon, who is defending that one district by Omaha right here, the second district, Don Bacon ahead of Democratic contender, 95% of the votes, so almost close to being called for Republicans that are holding on to that very important toss-up seat. And you know, also in the state of Wisconsin, we need to mention that Derek Van Orden in the 3rd district held his ground. This is a toss-up election as well. Wisconsin went blue for the Senate, red for the presidency, and a very important toss-up here in the 3rd district of Wisconsin is being held by Republicans. So, Tiffany, Steve, we're waiting for those key races in California. We still don't have the result. Republicans, if we go back to the balance of power, there are a short 14 seats to reach that 218 majority. And quickly, we've already mentioned this, but we need to go to the Senate and mention it again. Republicans have control of the Senate with at least 52 Senate seats secured. We're waiting on Pennsylvania and in Nevada as well, where Republicans are leading in that race. We're also waiting for the result in the senatorial race for Arizona right here. Democrats are leading. Ruben Gallego, Democratic congressman, is ahead of Carrie Lake. So, you know, Republicans control of the Senate. They're on the path to controlling or keeping control of the House. We're waiting for those key races in California to have better indication of whether Democrats will flip the House or Republicans will have full control of Washington. Back to you, Steve, Tiffany.
All right, Luis, thanks for that breakdown as we await who is controlling the House in terms of the balance of power. Let's bring it back in studio now to our guests. Darren, given we're still waiting on the balance of power information bit, with President Trump now as the elect, we're seeing news that China, Communist China, is saying it wants peaceful coexistence with America. Perhaps that's the threat of all these increased tariffs on the goods. And a Politico piece recently was also setting out that some EU officials are yearning for a Trump return. Not maybe because of him as a person, but it could send a shockwave to those countries who are currently dealing with, you know, the Russia-Ukraine war. How are you seeing, you know, Trump back in office impacting the global, you know, the international and geopolitical climate, not just the domestic part?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with, what did it look like the day before this last inauguration? And can it look like that again? It's harder to put out a fire than, of course, it is to start it. So there were no wars of significance at the time when Joe Biden took office. Now there are multiple of those. So it's going to take him some time, and we're going to have to give him the time to be successful in engaging with these nations, and specifically with Putin and Zelensky and Netanyahu, who's already given Trump a great letter of congratulations, and other leaders throughout the Middle East, and attempt to end these wars as quickly as possible. And you're not going to get something that both sides want of these wars 100%, but you got to be able to find something that just makes them end. And what Trump has masterfully done, to his credit, is he will engage with any person, regardless of who they are. Putin, Kim Jong-un. At the same time, though, he's over on the other side of the argument. He's making sure things like that the sanctions on the pipelines remain in place, and other actions are taken that hold people to account, and America to account as well. I expect him to continue doing that. Hey, NATO nations, pay your 2% of your GDP to your own national defense. But on this side, I'm also going to maintain the positive relationships with you as best as I can.
Speaking of holding to account, as we await the results and who's controlling the balance of power in the House, Javier, if, you know, the Democrats do gain that chamber, that could be a check and balance in play there. If it all is all red across the entire board, what are you seeing in terms of policies we can expect going forward, either with the House being Democratic or all across the board Republican?
Well, you know, I definitely see a loosening of the noose around the traditional energy sector, and I'm delighted by that. You know, to the point that the Colonel was making about international relationships, and certainly with China, you know, in Joe Biden, and I've spoken about this before, in Joe Biden, He shut down the Keystone Pipeline, and we predicted that inflation is going to go up, gas prices are going to go up, and the price of everything else, because most Americans don't recognize that only 46% of the crude oil that comes out of the ground goes into your gasoline tank. The other 60% goes into rubber and plastics and pharmaceuticals and cosmetics and everything else. So I think we're going to see an economy that I think stabilizes a little bit. The prices of everyday goods is going to stabilize a little bit because of the fact that Trump has already said, and I mean famously said, drill baby drill. That's going to be, I think, the principal thing that's going to happen. I like what I'm hearing about, kind of loosening the reins and the rope around the big tech sector. This administration, Lena Khan, at the Federal Trade Commission has had this misguided and relentless pursuit of big tech. We have become a society that punishes success. And, that is not the American way, first of all, and certainly the Hispanic business community. We want successful companies because we want to follow them. And it's these companies, these platforms like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Tesla, and Apple that right now are under the threat constantly of this administration. I believe that you're going to see in Donald Trump somebody that says these platforms are good for the American business community, they're good for the economy, and ultimately they're good for the American small business community.
I think we have to examine a couple of things. I think we have to examine how long Republicans will give President-elect Trump to determine how much is too long before he actually get things moving. They were very quick to put heavy expectations on President Joe Biden to get certain things done. So how far does that extend to President-elect Trump? Will they give him 6 months, a year, a full term? How long will they give him? And will it match the energy that they gave to President Joe Biden? And then when we talk about tech and environmental issues, sometimes the problem is not necessarily what a tech giant wants to bring. Sometimes it's the community which it flows through. So we're all familiar with the Keystone Pipeline, but the Byhalia Pipeline was a really big issue in the Memphis and Shelby County community, but they wanted to run it through a very urban community that was severely underserved and completely deteriorating. And so you're already doing it for a heavily impacted community that doesn't get a lot of positive things, and it's only going to ruin it. And we pride ourselves in Memphis on protecting the aquifer, and so this could potentially harm the water supply there. And we also have tech giants like, Tesla. That's Musk. That's Elon Musk. The problem is that he often likes to skirt some of the government restrictions or rules, and there's a reason that somebody always wants to skirt around the rules, and it's so that they can have their way. But we have to consider the impact to the people on the other side, the people who didn't wake up and have a $12 billion surplus because the stock market went up. We have to consider the people in those communities and in some of those lower level jobs around those companies that are impacted by those decisions.
I think that in mentioning regulations, you've hit the nail on the head of one of the things that Trump will take on quickly, which is systematizing which regulations are outdated and an imposition on American businesses and the small businesses especially. I think that he will take executive action. He doesn't need to wait for Congress to do that and start cutting all those regulations that have been inimical to American business interests and economic growth. And with Congress's help, whoever is in power in Congress, we can have new and more meaningful rules and regulations through legislation. Congress actually doing its job, as we've seen it not do so much over the last few years, and pass meaningful bills that help businesses and set regulations and standards, but in a way that doesn't cost us, doesn't cost the economy, doesn't impose an additional burden on low-income families who are already starting to get by. So I think this is one of the things that President Trump can do right out of the gate, and he doesn't need to wait for Congress or anyone else to do that.
I want to be careful when we talk about what he will do with small businesses, because who are we saying owns these businesses? Like, who are not just the faces, but who are the actual owners? What do they look like? What communities and zip codes do they come from? What services do they provide that improve the world around us? And also, who are the receivers of kickbacks? Because kickbacks are a real thing that exists in the business community, and it doesn't always benefit the person who needs it the most.
Certainly a lot of unknowns as to what the future may hold for both our nation and beyond. We're going to dig into it a lot more. We still have a ton of time, but in the meantime, coming up, NTD's Dave Martin is going to give us a look at the shifts in the Latino vote and the black vote. Don't go away. We'll be right back. There's a live look at the White House.
Funny expression. There's a little scar right below his neck. The artist, on a trip to somewhere in South America, he met this kid who told him a story about himself. The technique is really good. As you'll see, like in the foreground, there's water on his face. The texture is so realistic, but then sort of in the back, you have these washed out colors, almost a sort of fantasy feel. The whole of the picture is very balanced, and you still get that sense of harmony and warm light from it. The artist, he was really moved by the child's spirit. The child's from the slums, and so he looks around and he sees people who either get into drugs or they get into gangs, and he doesn't want that for himself. So he was telling this artist about how he's going to make a better life for himself. The immense spirit and determination that the kid had really stuck with the guy, so that's why he painted such a large portrait of the child.
Many of us have been child fighters, but this little kid learned to defend himself in his own way. It's a great sacrifice that way. And so this is another form of strength, another form of endurance. We are capable of much more than we think. These children amaze us.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic MyPillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen-size MyPillow for just $18.88. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
And welcome back to NTD's election analysis of 2024 election. And Donald Trump is he is now the president-elect. So let's dig into how he won his return to the White House. I'm here now with NTD's data analyst, Dave Martin. Dave, you've been studying the exit polls first off all night. Let's bring that up. In terms of the exit poll numbers, we're seeing reporting that the minority voters were actually shifting towards the Republicans. Is that what you're seeing here? Talk us through that.
I would say yes, some more than others for sure. Let's start off by looking at the Latino vote here. This is going to be the nationwide Latino voters. This is across approximately 15% of all registered voters in the U.S. identify as Latino. Now look at these. Now these margins here are the Democratic nominee versus Donald Trump. So in 2016, Hillary Clinton had a 38-point lead over Trump among Latinos nationwide. 2020 down to 33 points, but then look in 2024, down to just a 6-point lead here for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump among Latino voters nationwide. So a 27-point bump here over just 4 years. Now let's take a look at those in the swing states here, a couple of them anyway. Arizona Latino voters, they make up approximately 25% of all registered voters in the state. As you can see, 8 years ago, it's somewhat the same here. Hillary Clinton, a 30-point advantage over Trump among Arizona Latino voters, down to 24 here in 2020, and then in 2024, down to 13 points. So Trump, an 11-point bump here in the last 4 years among Arizona Latino voters. Let's take a look also at Nevada Latino voters. Nevada Latino voters, approximately 22% of all registered voters in the state of Nevada identify as Latino. This one's even more pronounced. 31-point bump or lead for Hillary Clinton over Trump in 2016. That was on to 26 4 years ago with Biden. And look at this, even between Trump and Kamala Harris among Nevada Latino voters. Now, they also asked Nevada Latino voters, what are your top issues here? And this kind of plays out into that, top issues for Latinos in the state of Nevada. Number 1, economy. Number 3, immigration. Both more linked to Donald Trump. Meanwhile, number 2, democracy, and number 4, abortion would be more for Kamala Harris. So it's kind of an interesting thing with the Latino voters there.
All right, very fascinating breakdown, Dave. What about the black vote? That's another massive voting bloc.
Yeah, that was considered to be going red too. It didn't do as much as we thought. Let's take a look here. U.S. black voters nationwide. Again, these numbers here are the numbers of the Democratic nominee over Donald Trump. As you can see, 8 years ago, Hillary Clinton nationwide an 81-point lead in this demographic. It goes down to 75 under Biden. And now in 2024, with Kamala Harris holding a 72-point lead over Donald Trump. But let's take a look at those again in 2 major swing states here, starting with Georgia. Georgia black voters, they make up 33% of all eligible voters in the state. And again, very similar margins here. 80 points in 2016 for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. It was down to 77 for Biden over Trump. And then 74 now for Kamala Harris. So slowly going down. But that 3-point bump there, that's worth approximately 50,000 votes. So very significant. Let's also look at North Carolina. Black voters, as a demographic, make more than just over 20% of all eligible voters in the state. Very similar numbers here, except kind of a jump from 20 to 24. 81-point lead for Clinton in 2016. It was up to 85 for Biden. But then look at this, an 11-point bump here, 74-point lead for Kamala Harris. So this is an 11-point bump here for Joe Biden. That's probably worth more than 100,000 votes coming towards Donald Trump. And again, they asked North Carolina black voters what their top issues were. Again, these are black voters in the state of North Carolina. You've got number 2 here, economy, and number 4 here, immigration. Those are more towards Trump, but then democracy, a close lead over economy, and abortion there at number 3. So really, the surge in Latino voters seemed to help them kind of all over the United States, but that small surge among the black voters really seemed to help him in the 2 swing states here in North Carolina and Georgia.
Very fascinating what you can find out with all of this data and the numbers that tell us. Well, Steve, back to you at the desk.
And thank you, Tiffany. And we do have some breaking news for you. Former President Barack Obama releasing a statement on the results of the election. Obama, who stumped for Harris during this campaign, congratulated Trump on his victory. He says, quote, "Living in a democracy is about recognizing that our point of view won't always win out and being willing to accept the peaceful transfer of power, and, quote, progress requires us to extend good faith and grace even to people with whom we deeply disagree." And right now we're going to go to NTD's Iris Tao, who is still live in Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago. Iris, talk to us about the latest updates from former President Trump.
Good evening to you, Steve. So former President Trump spent the day after his victory hunkering down at Mar-a-Lago, taking phone calls from world leaders, CEOs across the country, as well as from the current administration, all congratulating him on his White House win. Earlier this evening, Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence also congratulated Trump, posting on X that, quote, "The American people have spoken and Karen and I send our sincere congratulations." Meanwhile, it comes after Mike Pence earlier has said that in he cannot in good conscience endorse Trump. Meanwhile, Trump has also been getting some congratulations from former GOP critics, which include Senator Mitt Romney and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who had a strained relationship with Trump throughout the years. Meanwhile, earlier today, Trump also took two very important calls. One came from, of course, VP Harris, who in the call officially conceded the race to Trump today and also congratulated him. In Trump's campaign, putting out a statement about the call, saying that Trump, in return, also thanked Harris and commented on her strength, professionalism, and tenacity throughout the campaign, and that both leaders agreed on the importance of unifying the country. President Biden today also called Trump to congratulate him, also saying that he would like to invite Trump over to the White House. President Biden, we know that the White House has said that he would attend the inauguration in January for the new president, and also President Biden is set to address the nation and discuss the election results on Thursday. Unity, meanwhile, is a key message in Trump's victory speech last night here in West Palm Beach at his watch party. He emphasized that he will heal the country and bring the country together through success. And throughout the next 2 months, meanwhile, before he takes office, he will be entering this transition period where he will need to interview and pick members of his new cabinet and administration. So really no break for the president-elect. We do expect him to, in some form, address the nation either from here in Florida, or he could do something like he did back in 2016 after defeating Hillary Clinton, where he actually held a thank you tour in which he held more rallies during the transition period to talk to voters. Back to you.
And to use Iris Tao, thank you for that update live from Palm Beach and bringing the discussion back to our in-studio guests. Darren, I want to get your thoughts on the process right now in terms of Iris talking about different senators that are going to have to play the role of confirming appointments. In just about a week, the Republicans are going to have to vote for their majority leader, Mitch McConnell, stepping down. He will play out his term there for 2 more years in the Appropriations Committee. However, who do you think is going to be the likely person? There's a few names being floated, but it's going to get interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely going to get interesting, especially since the name of one of those senators comes from my state in Montana with Steve Daines, and you've seen him with President Trump quite a bit in all of his travels and going to football games and you name it. Other names, of course, Josh Hawley, John Thune. These are options out there as well, but it seems to me from what I'm seeing that Senator Daines, with his position in the NRSC, is probably leading that pack.
Yeah, Gerard, we have heard other names like John Cornyn, Rick Scott even, but to Darren's point, Steve Daines does seem like he might be the leading candidate.
That does seem to be the best bet right now, and followed closely by Thune.
What's your take, Javier?
I agree exactly with the Colonel and with Gerard. If it's not Daines, it's going to be Thune, in my opinion. And Darren?
I would hope that whoever is the pick is not somebody that President-elect Trump is picking because of proximity, but the best person to lead the Senate who can actually get some things done for the American people.
And Gerard, I want to circle back to the discussion that we were having about foreign policy, specifically when it comes to China. Former President Trump, he has gotten some praise from analysts about the way that his foreign policy led to no wars, and his approach of being unpredictable. But at the same time, it has also drawn some criticism in the way sometimes he often praises people like Xi Jinping of China. He gets, criticized for doing that sometimes. But on the back end of that, if you watch a lot of his campaign speeches closely, it feels as though the former president is still very upset with China, specifically for what they did with COVID and allowing COVID-19 to leave Wuhan, leave China via flights while they shut down the flights inside of China. Very obvious that they knew that it was spreading, but allowed it to spread to the United States. Trump seems like he has not forgotten about that. How do you anticipate he will deal with China in the next 4 years?
I think with Donald Trump's foreign policy, we have seen consistently the carrot and stick approach. And the carrot sometimes sounds like praise for dictators, but the stick has always been there in terms of economic sanctions, in terms of tariffs, in terms of trade disruption, more so than military action. I think we will see the same with China. And you're right, he has not forgotten about COVID and China's role. He could say that he would still have been president for 4 years, but for China and COVID. So right now, I think he is very mindful that he needs to take a firm stance with China, protect American investment, protect the American economy, but also protect our allies like Taiwan.
Darren?
Yeah, I agree. That's what he did the first 4 years, and it worked. Not perfectly, but it worked a lot better than what we've seen the last 4. So he'll continue pushing the carrot out there and look like a friend, but the stick will always be there. The Nord Stream pipeline is another example of that. He sanctioned that heavily. Imagine if we had kept those sanctions on Iran.
And if I could, Steve, if you look at border security, and Donald Trump has got a real focus on border security, when you look at the stem of fentanyl coming into this country, it's coming from China. Illicit cigarettes, it's a $934 billion business for China. Those illicit cigarettes are coming through our southern border from China. Vapes are now up over 2,186% amongst our children. Those are coming from China. Illicit medicines, fake medications, and I mean, it runs the gamut. And it's all coming through the cartels, all coming through the border. If you manage border security in a very real way, you're managing China.
And if it's any indication of what may be yet to come, China's currency last night, when it was clear, I think right around when Florida was called in such a wide margin for former President Trump, the Chinese currency plummeted. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure. It's been a great discussion here with our guests, but we do have to take a quick break. And when we come back, NTD's Jason Blair is standing by at Howard University in Washington, D.C., where Vice President Harris just gave her concession speech. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Abused youth often feel safer on the street. Now, more than ever, that's the most dangerous place of all. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming, and no young person is ever turned away. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month to help a young person. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Your gift will show them they're loved. Homeless young people are afraid and alone with nowhere else to turn.
You want to know that there's somewhere you can go that's safe. So the Covenant House did that for us.
Please call now with your gift of $19 a month. We'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. Please don't wait. Your gift is the lifeline a young person needs now. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org. Thank you for saving precious lives.
我们师傅讲过，过去武术的身法，以上阵的，你要是身法你保持好了，你就失去了生命。
Are today's mainstream martial arts not traditional martial arts?
现在有些人他学说传统武术，他尤其是西方人，他不懂。为什么我们要举行大赛呢？因为新唐人他就是要提倡传统武术，复兴中华5000年的传统文化。传统武术，真正的传统武术是讲武德的。 我相信有一点，就是守住武德，就有人教。
Rated in the best hearing aids of 2024, the Audion Atom 2 series offers superior sound quality and functionality for a fraction of the price. For just $189 a pair, the Atom 2 features 4 different hearing modes for all types of hearing loss. It packs crystal clear sound, a nearly invisible design, and is even rechargeable.
I actually like them better than my old $5,000 hearing aids. They're so comfortable, I forget I'm wearing them. And the sound is amazing.
The Atom Pro 2 is our smallest hearing aid yet, featuring advanced background noise cancellation, and is the world's first hearing aid with built-in UV cleaning that kills 99% of bacteria.
I could not believe how my hearing and life changed without seeing a doctor or having a hearing test.
Join over 500,000 happy customers today and get the hearing you deserve.
Call 1-800-433-6359 or go to audionhearing.com to get your pair of Audion hearing aids starting at just $189.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Legal Help Center. This is where we have professionals standing by to answer your questions regarding personal injury. So if you've been injured in an accident that was not your fault, like a car accident or a slip and fall, we can help. As a matter of fact, we are here to help. So take that first step and call the number on your screen right now. We have legal professionals standing by to answer your questions. They'll tell you if you have a case and how much your case is potentially worth. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Gina Belich, here with TV anchor and spokesman Tom Mustin. So Tom, you've been in television for over 20 years. You've participated in a number of big events. Tell everyone watching at home what makes the Legal Help Center so special and what it means for you to be here with us in the studio.
Well, Gina, first let me thank you for having me join you here today. Now, as far as who should call in right now, the answer is anyone who's been injured in an accident that was not their fault, because when you give us a call, you're going to speak with a live person, not some automated greeting or computer message, but an actual person who's ready to help. You'll receive a free consultation. You can get all your questions answered, and more importantly, find out how much your case is potentially worth.
Now, this is a service to you, the viewers, offering you a free consultation and getting you access to legal help. So if you've been injured in an accident that was not your fault, or you know someone recently in an accident, give us a call right now. You'll speak with a live agent, not some automated greeting, but an actual person right now who's ready to help you.
Like Gina said, if you've been injured in an accident, like a car accident or a slip and fall, the team is available to help. So take that first step. We have agents available for you right now. They'll answer any questions you have, let you know how much your case is potentially worth. Take care, everyone, and thank you for watching.
So let me say, my heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. I am so proud of the race we ran and the way we ran it. Over the 107 days of this campaign, we have been intentional about building community and building coalitions. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
And that was Vice President Kamala Harris giving her concession speech earlier today. Donald Trump has won the presidency. Let's check in now with NTD's Jason Blair, who's outside Howard University, where Harris spoke earlier this afternoon. Jason, what are some takeaways from her speech?
Yeah, so Vice President Harris did give her formal concession speech here inside of Howard University not that long ago. She first thanked her volunteers that were volunteering for her campaign. She thanked poll workers, election workers, and she said that she was proud of the campaign that she ran and the way that they ran it. And then, as you heard her talking about that, she, was proud to have a campaign that she said was bringing people together during the process. And also some other things she hit on is, as you heard earlier, that they will engage in a peaceful transfer of power when Donald Trump does come into the presidency. Another thing she hit on was we must accept the election results. And she says that she concedes to the race, but she does not concede in the fight that fueled her campaign.
And Jason,
and then as far as the crowd that was here, what was that?
How has the crowd been? You were there all of last night and today. How was the crowd last night and today?
Yeah, the difference between the crowds last night, there was, obviously probably a little bit more excitement. People were pretty optimistic last night. I was out here watching the people come in. There were a lot of students around from probably the many colleges here in D.C. and also Howard University, right where the talk took place. People, there was definitely a difference. I mean, people came in today, people were a lot more somber. There were still a decent amount of people that came in. There was a big line. They started letting people in at 1 o'clock. And, people were didn't quite have the pep in their step as they did yesterday. And everybody was pretty somber, listened to Harris attentively. Some people, said that they were disappointed. They're still kind of processing what all happened in the results and everything like that. But even before Harris talked, they shut down the gates to let people in. And some people had crowded out outside the gates, and they were still watching the talk on their phone. Some people got a little bit emotional. Overall, though, everybody was calm. There were no big incidents or anything like that. Everybody was pretty quiet, somber, and just kind of taking things in, and also expressed some hope. I mean, during Harris's talk, she did bring, that she's hopeful and change takes time is what she kind of articulated. So, things were pretty somber, and people are just kind of going about afterwards, taking everything in. Back to you.
All right, Jason Blair reporting for us in D.C., right outside where Harris's speech was today. Thank you so much. And let's go now to our excellent panel of guests here with us on the desk. We have Javier Palomares, the founder and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Business Council and former advisor to the Obama and McCain campaigns. Democratic strategist Theron Bond, Gerard Filitti, political strategist and senior counsel of the Lawfare Project. And a new addition to the panel, we welcome Cameron Hamilton, Virginia County Chief Elections Officer and former U.S. congressional candidate. He's also a former division director of the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you all so much for being here. Now, we just heard from our reporter outside of Howard University where, Harris did give her concession speech earlier today. Cameron, as a new guest to our panel, I'll let you kick it off. What are your reactions to her speech today and also Trump's speech last night, or I guess this morning?
So I think Trump's speech was really reminiscent of the coalition that he's been seeking to build here. The uniqueness of this campaign, this cycle versus what we saw in 2020 versus 2016 was a very broad base, many different perspectives. You see people like Tulsi Gabbard, you see RFK Jr. and many others. So his message and tone was very much on the nature of trying to appeal to a very broad family, if you will. He does use the words of unity, which is ironic because he also has divisive language that some find off-putting. Nonetheless, I think that he seeks to bring about policies in such a way that would bless all. So my reaction to Donald Trump's speech and conversations surrounding how the election was conducted is that I think this is a man with a very business-focused mindset who conveyed his opinion that the economy could be unleashed if properly led. Contrast that to Kamala Harris. I think she gave a very somber speech. It's understandable. There's quite a bit invested in this race. She had quite a bit of coalition and different representatives that were advocating for her, many different proxies from the news industry, those in the entertainment industry, people performing in professional sports, you name it. I think that she tried to strike a tone indicative of the dignity of her current office and position of the vice president. Having said that, I think that she also made it clear that her positions that she holds to, she's not abandoning. So I think overall, what you find is she attempted to lose with grace and dignity. I would take her at her face value at that. And I think Donald Trump is also trying to amass a broader coalition and a broader base, the likes of which he found in 2016.
On that big tent policy part, you did touch on the economic angle. Javier, earlier we were talking about regulations. We didn't quite get a chance for you to jump in there, so why don't you bring it in? What do you expect to see under a Trump presidency when it comes to regulation and what that means for the business community at large, but also that small business community?
Well, you know, back in 2016, Donald Trump was the first president since Ronald Reagan to offer any kind of tax relief to the American small business community. And I remember having to come on television as a Democrat who fought mightily against him and saying, this is phenomenal for the small business community. And since Ronald Reagan, back in, I believe, '86, no American president had done anything to help the American small business community with their taxes. So credit where credit is due. He also lessened regulation, the likes of what we've never seen before. He's promising to do that even further this time around. That is a boon for the American small business community. We are excited about the idea that administration is actually looking out for the American small business community and understands that regulation is choking off the beating heart of the American economy, which is the small business person.
Gerard, I want to get your thoughts on this. You know, former President Trump, or now President-elect Trump, is inheriting quite a lot. There's the global conflicts, there's the economy, inflation. We're seeing stocks rallying after he won the presidency. Of course, he's been promising the massive deportation. That's a lot of people we're talking about. That could be bringing up humanitarian issues, you know, families, if you're splitting them apart. How do you see him handling all of this?
Well, I think the important thing for him is to focus on one thing at a time. He needs to find the right people to guide policy and implement it, but he can't do everything at once. When you try to do that, you fail at everything. In terms of specific issues, look, the border, I think you're not going to see mass deportations. I think that we have seen historically court challenges to things like that. You're not just going to send in the National Guard to arrest people and throw them out of the country. I think that we will see a more coherent border policy. I think we'll see better rules in place on how to handle asylum claims, perhaps better resources given to keeping people out in a meaningful way, maybe foreign trade as well, going to the source of the problem, perhaps investing in those countries so that there is a better opportunity for people to stay home and not come here. Foreign conflicts links the same way. You want to create opportunity, you want to grow the global economy, because when people are doing well, they're not inclined to fight and destroy what they have.
And zooming in, go ahead.
And if I could, you know, to take off on Gerard's point, when you talk about mass deportations, there's campaign rhetoric, and then there's the reality of the presidency. A mass deportation is a euphemism for saying, I'm going to kill agriculture, I'm going to kill construction, I'm going to kill hospitality, I'm going to kill manufacturing, because if you look at where those critical American sectors get their labor force from, they're all immigrants. Agriculture, 70% immigrants. Hospitality, 50% immigrant. Manufacturing, 25% immigrant. Construction, 25% immigrant. If you mass deport those people, who's going to do the jobs in these cornerstone industries? Donald Trump knows very well that that's the case. So I think there's campaign rhetoric, and then there's the reality of how he will actually govern the United States.
And Theron, what are you expecting in terms of maybe some domestic changes?
I actually take President Trump-elect at face value when he says that. I think he does mean that, and the reason why is because he says he wants to give Americans their jobs back, and if he knows that mass deportation will take away some folks that he has said are kind of acquiring some jobs that could be spent for Americans. I think he means that. I think he takes that seriously. But what I don't want to see is the image that we associate with now President-elect Trump when it came to his immigration policy, and that was those children in cages with the aluminum foil blankets, and there were families that separated. That's what we do not deserve to have living rent-free in our heads anymore. And before we start talking about immigration, before we start talking about foreign policy, I'm a huge proponent of taking care of home first. If we have people that are unhoused, that are without jobs, that can't seem to just get a hang on life, get a step up, like, we've got to take care of those folks first. And I'm going to say this, and I haven't heard anybody talking about it. Whether we like it or not, despite how President-elect Trump got there, he's a convicted felon. I would be hard pressed and enthused if he put forth a ban the box initiative, because now he's risen to the office of the presidency. He has the highest job in the land despite a felony conviction. Why would he not open the door for other people who have had the same experience as him, despite ethnicity, despite gender, give them an open door and a pathway to be great too?
There, just to push back a little bit, wouldn't you have to agree that the children in cages was sort of a remnant of an Obama-era policy?
The American people remember that under President-elect Trump. That's what the American people remember. If you ask them about it, they don't associate that with President Obama, which that was part of the issue. We did have problems with some of his immigration policies, but when you associate the image to a particular president, that's the one, if you ask any American voter walking down the street, that's who they're going to attribute it to.
Well, that's a great success of the Democratic Party in attributing that image to Donald Trump when it really belongs to Barack Obama. So I have to give credit where credit is due, but that is also the dirty campaigning that we've seen, and we need to be factual. That was not a Trump initiative. I think Donald Trump has shown that he abides by the law and what the courts say when it comes to deportations and immigration policy.
But I think if he abided by the law, then he wouldn't have 34 felony convictions. And again, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with how he got there, they still exist. He has those. They are on his record. He is a convicted felon. He was not the first person that was a convicted felon to run for president. There have been at least 2 others that are on the books that we know about. And if we want to talk about facts and association, we can't let it go by without talking about the rhetoric that he presents out, and that's just the honest truth.
Indeed, agreed. The issue of mass deportations, as Javier pointed out, very complicated situation, but I think President Trump did say that he is going to first start by targeting criminals, and then said we'll figure out the rest from there. So
that is exactly the right approach.
We'll definitely continue this discussion in a moment. Coming up, NTD's Luis Martinez will bring us the latest on some of these house races. Luis.
Yes, when we come back from the break, I want to talk to you about ticket splitting and how some complex decisions by people in Wisconsin and Michigan and the state of Arizona gave Trump the presidency, but not a supermajority for Republicans in the Senate. I also want to touch on all those House races that flipped, either from Democrat control to Republican, from Republican to Democrat. So we'll have that right after the break.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. So if you want to talk to your kids, you got to get it trending. I was just trying to get your attention.
Could I just ask?
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
Nearly 1 in 4 U.S. consumers have been a victim of identity theft, even when they did all the right things to protect their personal information.
I did everything right, but an institution that had my data didn't. And now my identity's been stolen.
Banks, hospitals, employers, and other institutions all have your personal information too. And when they're exposed, careful monitoring of your accounts and credit won't be enough.
I change my passwords all the time. I shred my documents. I thought I was bulletproof, honestly.
I was on the hook for a $75,000 loan I didn't take out.
The information thieves need to steal your identity is already in the hands of others, and it only takes one vulnerability in one place to put your identity at risk.
Let me make this very, very clear. You could do nothing wrong, be perfect about all of your security, and still be a victim of identity theft.
Tens of thousands of my hard-earned money gone.
The stakes are high, and even if you take steps to protect your personal information, you're not the only one who has it. Only LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points every second, alerting you to the widest volume of threats others could miss, far beyond what you could possibly monitor on your own. Like someone trying to use your social security number to open a loan, purchase a home in your name, or even take over your investment accounts.
The alerts I get from LifeLock are super simple. Was this you? Yes or no?
And if you become a victim, a dedicated U.S.-based identity restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed. All LifeLock members are backed by the LifeLock $1 Million Protection Package, including reimbursement for stolen funds.
There was a letter from LifeLock with a check for over $81,000. They made me whole.
Call now or go online and use promo code GET35 to save 35% off an annual plan for your first year. All plans include a 60-day money-back guarantee. Call 1-800-598-0995 or visit lifelock.com/get35 to save 35% on your first year. Enroll now.
And welcome back. Let's go now to our DC studio with NTD's Luis Martinez. Luis, we were expecting ticket splitting in Arizona, but we're also seeing it in other states. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, let's jump right into the Senate races because here's where we saw the most interesting ticket splitting. So if we look right here in the Rust Belt, we have that Michigan and Wisconsin for the senatorial race went with the Democratic candidate. Here in Michigan, Elisa Slotkin, Congresswoman, won that race by the minimum margin. They're still counting votes, but it's already been called. And in Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin also by 1 percentage point defeats the Republican contender. And if we go to Arizona, larger margins, the Democrat current congressman who's running for the Senate in the state of Arizona leading by 3 points. Now, if we look at the same map, but with the electoral votes for the presidential race, if we go over here, we can see that Michigan and Wisconsin actually went for former President Donald Trump in the presidency. But like I said, if we go to the Senate, it's actually the Democrat who's ahead. So we're seeing ticket splitting. I think the most interesting ticket splitting is happening in Arizona because here we have a 3-point margin in favor of the Democratic candidate for Senate. But if we look at the presidency, we see that Donald Trump is up by 5 points. So that means that the electorate in Arizona is actually making a conscious decision to pick a presidential candidate from one party and a senatorial candidate of another party. That could be because they want to see checks and balances on power. Also very interesting is the state of Ohio, that if we go back to 2018, the last time that Senate seat in Ohio was up for re-election, Ohio picked Sherrod Brown, a Democrat, by like a good margin, 7 points back in 2018. Then we go to 2020 presidential election, Ohio over here picks Donald Trump by a substantial margin as well, 8 points here. So they're going back and forth in between a Democratic senatorial candidate, a Republican presidential candidate. But when we go to Ohio 2024, something interesting happened. There was no ticket splitting in Ohio with the Senate race. Trump won the presidency, the race for the presidency in the state of Ohio, and in the Senate, Bernie Moreno did as well. So interesting. We'll have to analyze why there was a ticket splitting in Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, but Ohio, that traditionally had been ticket splitting since 2018 at the very least, decided not to do so. Tiffany, I also want to talk about the House races that flipped, because we were mostly talking yesterday about those races that Democrats needed to flip in order to regain control of the House. But if we go to the state of North Carolina, for example, we actually see that in the 6th district, the 13th and the 14th district here, the Republicans are winning, and they actually flipped those seats. So in the state of North Carolina, Republicans actually flipped 3 seats that were blue to red, and that's interesting. That was not expected before the elections. The same happened in Alabama, but on the other way around. We saw that here in Alabama's 2nd district, Democrats flipped this seat after some redistricting. The early assumption is that the black vote in the state of Alabama in the 2nd district went for Democrats. We also saw in Michigan's 7th district that seat flipped from the Democratic candidate, a congressman that was already there, to Tom Barrett. So we've seen some very interesting behavior this election in the balance of power for the Senate and for the House. In the case of the House, we still don't have the final results. Here we have Republicans holding on to 204 seats so far, and Democrats 187, the magic number being 218. And Steve mentioned, and they were discussing in the panel, next week will be really important for Congress as there will be leadership races both in the House and the Senate. Back to you.
And Luis, these shifts in the balance of power are really only down to a few races flipping from one side to the other. Can you break those down for us?
Of course. If we want to think about the race for the House, we need to look at California. I've been mentioning this over and over again, and you've been talking about it in the panel as well. But if we want to look at what are the races that are missing in order to determine the balance of power in the House of Representatives, we're talking about California's 13th district with John Duarte, who's holding his seat so far with 52% of the votes. We also see here in the 22nd, David Valadao, with a large Hispanic population in that district, is holding the line, but still only about half of the votes are counted. Young Kim down here holding the line in California's 4th district. And we're also waiting to hear from Washington's 3rd district here, Mary Glueson Paris against Joe Kent. We still don't have a final tally. I've mentioned this before. It's a rematch from 2022. We'll see if former President Donald Trump being in the ballot pushes Joe Kent over the finish line. But no new updates as to where the House is going to be tipping. It will be very interesting to see as there's a budget process coming up in December, and depending on the balance of power of the 119th Congress, current congressmen might strategize differently on how to approach that budget battle that comes before December 20th. Back to you, Tiffany.
All right, Luis, thanks for that breakdown. And as you mentioned, the House balance of power is still up in the air. We'll come back to you shortly to learn what races we should be watching. Right now, though, let's go back to our panel, bringing it back in here. Cameron, given those results we just heard in the Senate races and also the House races, when it comes to the phenomenon of ticket splitting, what do you think is behind that?
So anything politically comes down to the candidate themselves. There's a down ballot demographic that you see and you find trends, but it still does come down to the X factor. Does this individual have a family? Do they appeal to the base? Do they appeal to moderate voters? What's their story and message? How much do they captivate the audience and the voting class? That all plays in a variety of influencing that sort of 5 to 10% fluctuation that you'll find within those down ballot tickets. In states where they have a candidate who did very well with the down ballot casting, then you'll find that they have a message that resonates very good with many different individuals. In Virginia, for example, we've had some great candidates who unfortunately did slightly worse than the president, again, because they see President Trump economically as a reasonable choice and option. However, they may not like the congressional candidate quite as much as they do, and they see the difference between Kamala Harris and or President Trump. So we have to make sure that we understand the voters as they're looking at each of these selections. Comparing Donald Trump to Kamala Harris is not the same as, say, comparing Mr. Moreno and his opponent in the Senate race. There are uniquenesses and nuances. I will tell you that I've obviously formerly run for Congress, and I got to speak with many different voters. You find a variety of individuals that have no problem acknowledging and voting for the Democratic Party for congressional, even for senatorial, but were overwhelmingly supporting Donald Trump, people that you would not think would be voting for that for the presidency. And that was a fairly typical phenomenon, especially in some of the more rural parts of Virginia. So it really is unique. It depends on the state, depends on the culture, and most importantly, it depends on the actual candidate themselves.
And Theron, as a political strategist, you've run multiple campaigns. How do you read that Cameron just laid out there, where it does come down to that character?
Well, before today, I had said there was going to be a lot of split ticket voting. There would be people that voted for President-elect Trump that would vote differently for, you know, their U.S. senator or their House member. And in the reverse, and here we are, I think based on states' rights and that being a significant conversation this cycle, states that had ballot measures, they could vote in favor or against those because that gets to them a lot quicker. And then they could vote for somebody differently for president who would maybe affect a broader scope of people. And I think that's what we saw happen all across the country.
It's quite fascinating on that local level, right, Gerard? When we talk about the political cases, some of those, the federal ones, seems like they're going to be at least tossed for now. When it comes to the state of New York, though, AG Letitia James is saying she will continue that. Talk to us about this local level, if you will.
Well, local level is also personality driven, and we've seen whether it's Alvin Bragg or Letitia James, they also have political ambitions. They also have a stake in this. Some of them have come into office saying that they would get Donald Trump or that they would do something that's more political than legal or use the law in that fashion. So I think that is what we continue to see. It's not just enforcing the law, there is an effort, there has been an effort to go after Donald Trump. And whether or not these will continue, I think they will. There's no check on Letitia James. There's almost no check on Alvin Bragg. That's Governor Hochul, and she hasn't shown any willingness to do anything. So ultimately, what you will have to come down to is what a judge decides. And whether that is a resolution of these criminal proceedings a few years from now when Trump is no longer in office, or whether it's dismissed because there are constitutional grounds for doing so, or some flaw in the trial that's still being appealed, we have to wait and see how the legal system plays out.
Definitely a lot to watch for here, especially with what the next presidency and Senate and balance of power are all inheriting and how that impacts us, right? But still to come, I'll be joining NTD's Dave Martin to take a look at exit polls. So Dave, tell us what you have coming up.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking at exit poll data to see both Donald Trump's and Kamala Harris's biggest gains in the demographics right after this break.
Say goodbye to harsh, bitter coffee and hello to a delicious, smooth brew. With specialty quality beans, expertly roasted in-house, you'll taste the difference with every sip. Fermented with a blend of 50 enzymes, Dave's Coffee delivers a rich brew like no other. Made with the highest grade specialty beans available, you're sure to taste the difference. Elevate your morning with Dave's enzyme fermented coffee.
When it comes to disasters and emergencies, it's not a matter of if, but when.
I'm relying on luck, but who knows if it'll be on my side.
Let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Take control at ready.gov/olderadults.
Tangazo hili linahusu njaa. Tarajia kuona watoto wakiwa na njaa katika maeneo haya. Mambo yalikuwa bora kwa miaka mingi. Tuliweza kupigana na njaa na watoto wachache walikufa. Lakini sasa mambo yamebadilika na kwa mabaya zaidi. Hii ni kwa sababu wakati huu ukame umeangamiza zaidi.
Через війни та конфлікти ми мусимо залишати наші домівки і всі наші речі. Ми навіть не маємо їжі. Тому нам потрібна ваша допомога.
Millions of children are fighting to survive due to inequality, conflict, poverty, and the climate crisis. Save the Children is working alongside communities to provide a better life for children. And there's a way you can help. Please call or go online to give just $10 a month, only 33 cents a day. We urgently need 1,000 new monthly donors in the next 30 days to help the children we support around the world. You can help provide food, medicine, care, and protection, plus so much more that a child needs, by calling right now and giving just $10 a month.
Ви можете допомогти голодуючим родинам вижити. और बच्चों को भूख से मरने से रोक सकते हैं।
All we need are 1,000 monthly donors in the next 30 days. Please call or go online now with your monthly gift of just $10. Thanks to generous government grants, every dollar you give can have up to 10 times the impact. And when you call with your credit card, we will send you this Save the Children tote bag as a thank you for your support.
Toto kote duniani potrzebuють вашої допомоги.
Your small monthly donation of just $10 could be the reason a child in crisis survives. Please call or go online to givetosave.org to help save lives.
And welcome back to NTD's Election Analysis 2024 edition. Let's head on over to the Data Hub with NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, in explaining Trump's win via demographics, what were his biggest gains?
Yeah, I'd like to highlight 4 of his biggest gains here. Let's start with young voters ages 18 to 29. Now in 2020, Biden had a 60 to 36 lead over Trump, so a 24-point advantage. 4 years later under Kamala Harris, though, down to 54 to 43, so an 11-point lead there. So it's actually a 13-point bump from 24 down to 13 in favor of Donald Trump. That's a 13 right there. Now let's look at the next higher age group here too. Those ages 30 to 44, again, this is national voters. In 2020, Biden a 52 to 46 lead over Trump, a 6-point lead there. But in 2024, it was down to 49 to 48 for Harris, so 6 down to 1. So a 5-point bump there for Donald Trump there among U.S. voters ages 30 to 44. Let's take a look at a couple minorities here as well. U.S. Asian voters here, again, this is across the country. In 2020, Biden a 61 to 34 lead over Trump, a 27-point advantage there. But in 2024, down to 54 to 39, a 15-point advantage. So 27 from 15. That's a 12-point bump there for Donald Trump. And of course, I've talked about the Latino voters before, but it's worth repeating here. 2020, Biden a 65 to 32 lead nationally among Latino voters. It's a 33-point advantage for Biden. But in 2024, down to just 52 to 46, down to just a 6-point lead. That's a 27-point bump here among Latinos across the country for Donald Trump.
And Dave, what about on the Democratic side? Any gains that Harris saw?
Yeah, we've got a couple here, of course. U.S. white female voters with a college degree here. Now in 2020, Biden a 54 to 45 lead, so a 9-point lead there over Donald Trump. 4 years later, Harris is up at the 57 to 41, so a 16-point advantage in this age group. So that's a 7-point bump there for Kamala Harris. Let's take a look at one more. Those ages 65 and older. This one surprised me. 2020, Trump a 52-47 lead among those aged 65 and older across the country. But in 2024, Kamala Harris tied him up at 49. So it's a 5-point lead down to a tie. So it's a 5-point advantage there, or bump, you could say, for Kamala Harris among those aged 65 and older. So Kamala Harris, of course, made some gains, guys. Just, of course, not as many as Donald Trump. Back to you guys at the desk.
And thank you for that, Dave. And we're going to bring the discussion back to our panel here. Some interesting numbers there, but ultimately, I think we should discuss the implications of this election, particularly when it comes to the Supreme Court. Gerard, how might this administration's judicial priorities differ from Trump's previous tenure?
Well, I think, first of all, when it comes to the Supreme Court, there may be one vacancy to fill in the next 4 years, so that will be very informative, and we may see a continuation of the same type of appointments we've seen before with a Republican Senate. If it's still a Republican Senate at that time, that would make confirmation much easier, but not a given. I think Trump's priorities are in using the legal system to challenge laws that have been on the books that he does not agree with, that he thinks are bad for America, that are bad from an economic perspective or are bad from a social perspective. We see this with regulations as well, because a lot of what we see as challenges to rulemaking comes through the courts. So we will see the courts play a crucial role, whether it's on actions that Donald Trump takes or people challenging those actions. We will see a very busy Supreme Court for the next 4 years.
Cameron, what implications do you think this election may hold for the Supreme Court, particularly when you think of Samuel Alito, Justice Thomas, both getting up there in age?
You're absolutely right. I think President Trump is looking at this as a legacy. Arguably, one of the greatest legacies that a presidency has on the American people is their appointments to the Supreme Court, because it transcends 20, 30 years, quite a significant influence. I think as those two individuals who've been proven conservatives for many, many years, as they age, they'll likely step down, and that'll be an opportunity for Trump to cement an appointee who is younger and has the potential with vitality to go on 20, 30 years into the future, thereby ensuring that cases like what we saw with the Chevron doctrine and others are continued in perpetuity, if you will. So I think Trump is looking at this very intentionally. I will tell you, from a lot of the Republican strategy side, there was a tremendous amount of focus, even on the donor side, on the conservative base, on the Senate. Because if a Trump presidency comes back, it's stymied by a Senate that's actually looking to create war or conflict with the presidency, whereas a Senate that's aligned with the president has a significant amount of influence and a much more streamlined process to confirm judges, confirm appointees. It's not just the Supreme Court too, though. You have district judges all throughout the United States that are critical and essential. And again, I think President Trump is looking to cement a more long-term basis of having that kind of judicial prerogative of a restraint of federal power. So it's very interesting to see how it'll play out. I think that the Supreme Court, as well as the district courts, are something very much within the focus and lens of the Trump camp, at least those within his circle. And Trump, now being a member who is targeted by law enforcement, targeted by many elements of the judicial system, he takes this matter very personal. And he wants to seek restraint and or an ability to ensure that the American people have their case properly heard and appealed.
A lot of really interesting points in there. You know, I haven't run the numbers, crunched the numbers, but he could potentially have 5 appointments on the Supreme Court. I don't know how many presidents in history. It'd be an interesting factoid to see. What are your thoughts?
Well, I completely agree with Cameron, first of all. But secondly, I mean, you talk about cementing his legacy long after he's gone. Supreme Court, appointments, judicial judges all over the country. I mean, that is how you change, the trajectory of a nation. It's through those kinds of plays. Some might say that he's playing chess while the rest of us are playing checkers. That was the goal all along, and he accomplished it the first time around. He's going to go back for a second bite at that apple. I would if I was in his shoes.
And Theron, how do you see these appointments influencing key social issues?
I think this is where we talk about the devastation that American voters who aren't extremely conservative will feel, and the anxiety that many of us are experiencing, because now there's no form of recourse should there be a situation that we're a part of where litigation is necessary. If it comes down to district courts and they're more conservative and it's a social issue, well, we know which way it's going to lean. If it's a state Supreme Court, and we had at least 5 states this cycle that had state Supreme Court seats that were up. And then if we go all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, the top of the thing, then we go, well, how does that lean? Well, it generally leans conservative, which means if you're a more liberal person or there's a more social issue, then you won't find any justice in your matter, because the courts have leaned against us the entire time. And I think it's a reverse play, because it used to be, well, if we enter a situation and it's someone more conservative versus someone more liberal, it's, well, let's take it to the courts and then the judge will decide. But now the courts generally lean significantly conservative, which means if you're more liberal, you don't have an outlet.
I will say there's a reasonable argument to be made from a counter of that, and just that as a businessman, as one with significant financial industry, you like to see where the field is politically across a spectrum of different states and different regions. Having broader state autonomy, having strong state governments, strong state legislatures, and even strong state judicial branches gives that kind of leverage and deference to be able to ensure that the American people can move and exist within cultural groups of where they choose to. So I will say those of the very firm financial industry have cemented many different strongholds in, for example, Delaware, because the Delaware judicial process has been very, very pro-business. You find that with a variety of different rulings that they've had in the past, which is partially why it's been so difficult for some more progressive-leaning law enforcement officers and law enforcement agencies to target, for example, Elon Musk and others, because he has based some of his businesses and finances out of Delaware, a state that is very pro-business and very deregulatory. So I will say it is unique, and Trump has always kind of held this tone about emboldening and empowering state governments, because I think that does give the American people more enfranchisement as opposed to the opposite, which is where when you put everything on a Supreme Court, there's a significant amount of the American electorate that might not always like that ruling. Whereas if you empower the state level, you give that broad interpretation at various different levels.
But as we've seen, states' rights generally are just the back door when the federal government doesn't want to be accountable for their decisions or support people. States' rights has been a huge point of tension in many, many states, because depending on where you live geographically depends on what rights you may have or not, from bodily autonomy to how much taxes you pay to even business entities. And so that's why in this case, there are some things that we do need the federal government to say, this is what blanket legislation is going to look like, and not reserve it for states' rights, because everyone doesn't have the option to move from California to New York or Ohio to Arkansas. And so states' rights have been nothing but an excuse not to do what the federal government is supposed to do.
Supreme Court, certainly a very important issue to voters across the spectrum. Still to come, we'll go to NTD's Christina Corona, who's on the ground in Arizona. Stay tuned for more after this quick break.
Performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
NATOpath were driven to improve the lives of people by providing highly effective supplements that solve common health problems and support optimal health. This is what being on the path is all about.
Visit getnativepath.com/NTD for your special offer.
Shop the Mathis Design Studio for Black Friday savings on luxury designer furniture. Get factory authorized savings on all the top brands with heirloom quality pieces for every room in your house. Choose from our incredible in-stock selection, or let our complimentary design staff help you create a custom look to match your own personal style for less than you ever imagined. Get the lowest prices of the year through Black Friday at the Mathis Design Studio.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic MyPillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen size MyPillow for just $18.88. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
Will radical lies determine your child's future, or will timeless truths? Fathom the Good equips children with wisdom against the world. Our homeschool curriculum teaches high schoolers to think critically. We provide primary texts, original content, reasoning tools, and mentoring videos to help them transform America. Teach your children to navigate the world's woke confusion. Teach them to fathom the good.
And you're watching NTD's 2024 election analysis. Workers are still busy counting ballots in the state of Arizona. Let's turn our attention to Christina Corona, who's on the ground in Maricopa County. Christina, what is the latest?
That's right. We're here in Phoenix, Arizona, right outside the tabulation center, where there's still a lot of work left to be done here. Now, as of this morning, there were 700,000 ballots that still needed to be counted for. However, that number is shrinking by the hour, with workers coming in and out, and officials telling us they will be working around the clock, rotating shifts 24 hours a day, just to make sure everything goes smoothly throughout the week.
Tell us, why does it take so long for the ballots to be counted, and how long are they saying it will be until they're all in?
Right. Well, here in Arizona, the majority of the residents vote by mail, which could take officials several days longer to verify all of those signatures. Now, the next steps will be to report the ballots that were dropped off on Election Day and the weekend prior, which can take anywhere from 10 to 14 days to finalize those results. And officials also gave an update of what the process will look like throughout the week. Let's take a look.
We will work hand in hand with the recorders team as they verify signatures, process early ballots, and then we will get them tabulated and reported to you all. After Election Day, results will be released daily. We plan for that likely to be around the 7 p.m. hour.
As of now, 61% of the votes have been reported in Arizona, and the next wave of results will be available at 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. tonight, Mountain Time. Reporting from Phoenix, Arizona, Christina Corona, back to you at the studio.
NTD's Christina Corona, live in Maricopa County, Arizona. Thank you, Christina. And now back to our in-studio panel. I want to get everyone's thoughts here about political realignment going on. A number of news outlets today running stories saying last night's results mark a transformed Republican Party. Exit polls indicating Trump won 45% of the Hispanic vote, including a majority of Hispanic men, between 25 and 30% of the black male vote nationwide in some states, doubling his share from 2020, and that he also won the largest share of the Jewish vote since the 1980s. It's worth noting he also managed to simultaneously increase support among Arab Americans. Javier, as someone who has worked across the aisle and built coalitions throughout your career, how do you view this political realignment?
You know, it's real. If you look at Donald Trump's trajectory with the Hispanic community in 2016, he got nearly 30% of it. 2020, 35% of it. Last night, some 45% of it. He won states like Florida and Texas decidedly. Texas isn't going anywhere but red. It's maroon now. I also, I was disappointed watching some of the news programs today. There were some comments made about Hispanic men being, chauvinist and misogynistic, and nothing could be further from the truth. If Hispanic men were in fact machismo and misogynistic, how do you explain places like Brazil and Argentina and Nicaragua and Honduras and Costa Rica and Chile and Mexico, where long ago and historically we voted women into the position of power, into the supreme leader of those nations? That is a myth. That is a party that is looking for a scapegoat, and it's really insulting to me as a Hispanic that I've said it until I'm brown in the face. Democrats ignore the hell out of the Hispanic community. Every 4 years they come around and expect us to vote for them. Donald Trump had a ground game since 2015. So I don't know why anybody's surprised that the Hispanic vote went to Donald Trump. And then on top of that, now the Democrats are saying, well, it was the Hispanic males who abandoned us. They didn't abandon anybody. They went to somebody who was engaging them.
Darren, what does this mean for Democratic Party's strategies moving forward?
Throw it all out the window and start over. And I do mean all of it. Whatever they thought was working, it's not. Whatever they thought was helpful, it wasn't. And it's evident in the election results. I mean, we're not just talking about the presidential race. We're talking about the Senate and likely the House. So we didn't just lose one major race. We lost the whole thing. And so what does that mean for their strategy? I didn't see a lot of down ballot coordination. Oftentimes you would see the president connected to some U.S. Senate races, some House races, maybe even some state legislative races, but you didn't see that. And even with the 2 black women in Maryland and Delaware who made history last night, there is a bit of disassociation there. And I think because that was a lack of confidence that existed in the strategy for Vice President Harris's campaign. And it doesn't take a Democrat to see that. So it would behoove them to put people at the table that they may have previously viewed as unconventional, outcasts, overlooked. Those are the people with the creative ideas that are willing to still put in the grunt work to get the party moving forward. I think whatever has been done in the past, like, that's done. And we've got to start anew the same way. The Republican Party has shifted, and now it's more of Trump's party. The Democrats were not saying this is more of Kamala Harris's party, and typically whoever is at the top of the ticket has that association, and that's not something we saw happening this year.
And if I could add, Steve, Democrats have always believed back in 2016, the rhetoric was that Donald Trump won because he spoke to ignorant Americans, and my point back then was he won because he spoke to ignored Americans. And it's a big distance between being ignorant and being ignored. And this time around, there is no question. It was a landslide in his direction. There aren't that many ignorant Americans. Some very educated people decided to go with Donald Trump because they couldn't see a future in the Democratic Party. And we have to deal with that as Democrats.
Cameron, I'll give you a chance to respond to the gut check that Theron mentioned, but I also want to talk about something Christina Corona, a reporter there in Maricopa County. You are the Virginia County Chief Elections Officer. So she's down there. We don't know how long. Thank goodness last night's election didn't come down to Arizona, because many Americans would be sitting here wondering where we stand. In your opinion, as somebody deeply involved in the elections process in your state of Virginia, how possible and I guess how should it be in terms of finding out the results on, if not the same day, the next morning?
It all depends on the state legislature, what specific election law they've passed, and what the administrative remedies are to process votes earlier or later. Some states, for example, have allowed their elections officers to open up mail-in ballots prior to the actual day of election and to tabulate them, but to keep those votes in suspension. Other states do not. For example, Virginia does not allow early votes, which are conducted by mail, to be counted until after the polls are closed. So all of those things produce unique administrative problems that have to be addressed. I will also tell you, risk limiting audits are fairly common in Virginia. What that means is they do a corroborative test on whether or not the actual Scantron ballots are matching with what the paper ballots indicate. Likely in Arizona, they have something of a very similar nature. Doing hand count balloting is also very unique because you have to have several witnesses. And not only that, but each ballot requires an affidavit and or a sworn statement to attest to its authenticity. These are all unique nuances that can either speed up or slow down that process. So that's why we have state legislatures that pass their effective law. Article 1 of the Constitution makes it abundantly clear what the role of that legislature looks like. And then I will say, in response to some of the comments made about the Democratic Party, I think that's really unique. I think the Democratic Party does have a crisis on its hand, where especially President of the Union of the Teamsters came out publicly supporting Donald Trump. Granted, the organization didn't endorse him formally. We've seen this new courting of the Republican Party to the union working class. We saw it with J.D. Vance. We saw it with many others in an era that really wants to portray the value judgment that the average voter has. Yes, before, union workers fought for benefits, wages, a decent work, and a decent pay. But now they're dealing with some of the recourse of an increase in crime. They're dealing with the recourse of weaponization of government and burdensome regulation, which stifles economic growth, which actually negatively impacts their ability to obtain good paying jobs. So you see union workers making a different value judgment now than what we've traditionally seen over the past 30 to 40 years. And I think it was very effective for the Republican Party to reach out to blue collar workers across this country who, as again, my colleague over here has said before, felt ignored. And so we have a significant portion of the American electorate that really just wanted to feel that someone running for the high office was one of them, understood their challenges, understood the daily life. And while Donald Trump is a billionaire, he's been a real estate mogul in New York, nonetheless, he's dealt with challenges of our law enforcement. He's dealt with the challenges of crime. He's dealt with the challenges of regulation and of the recourse of government weaponized against Americans in a way that many rural and suburban Americans connect with on a very deep level.
It does look like we are seeing both parties shifting. I think it's an important conversation to get back to, but still to come, we'll check in with NTD's Luis Martinez, who's watching the key House races closely. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And first, right now, you're looking at a live shot of the Capitol there, where a lot is happening. So we'll have a lot more for you in just a few minutes.
Hi friends, Richard Karn here. Now I'm known as the guy who can fix just about anything, but the technology in most appliances requires very special training to fix. My point is, even I know when I've met my match, and that's why my family has Choice Home Warranty. So we won't get stuck with high-priced repairs.
Choice Home Warranty covers over 25 major home systems and appliances. That's your AC, heating, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and so much more.
Imagine for less than a cup of coffee a day, Choice Home Warranty can help protect you from expensive major system and appliance breakdowns that your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover. But you have to call now before it's too late.
Every homeowner should have Choice Home Warranty. Your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover your appliances.
Washing machine, dryer, refrigerator, air condition. If I had any issues arise, they were able to take care of it immediately.
Now, homeowner's insurance won't protect you when your home's major systems and appliances break down due to normal wear and tear. But Choice Home Warranty will. They can help cover repairs and replacements.
Choice Home Warranty is the best warranty we've ever used. It would save you so much money in the long run.
Hey, I'm not the only one raving about Choice Home Warranty. They were named a Best Home Warranty Company and Best Claim Service by U.S. News 360 Reviews.
Call Choice Home Warranty now and get access to a nationwide network of over 15,000 technicians and the latest appointment setting technology so you'll know when they're on their way.
If I have an issue with an appliance or something around the house, I just call up Choice Home Warranty and I don't have to worry about that.
So, do what this old DIYer did and call Choice Home Warranty now before something breaks down. Tell them I sent you and get your first month free.
Call Choice Home Warranty before it's too late and get protection for your heating, AC, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and more. Call for your free quote today. Call in the next 5 minutes and get your first month free. 800-360-6782. 800-360-6782.
A painting that has true beauty. I imagine it's like a door. The artist holds the key to open the door and bring people to a purer world. A world where people are more compassionate.
And welcome back. The balance of power in the House is still pending. Let's go now to NTD's Luis Martinez in Washington, D.C. Luis, what are the races we need to be watching right now?
Of course, first let's have a quick overview of what the House balance of power is looking at. As of right now, we have Republicans with 204 seats and Democrats with 187, magic number 218. If we look at the map, the races that still haven't been called that we need to pay close attention to determine the balance of power in the House of Representatives. Let's start with the state of Pennsylvania. There's here in the 8th District, Robert Bresnahan is besting right now Matt Cartwright with 99% of the votes in. That would be a seat that Republicans would be flipping and adding to their net gains. If we also look at right here, Pennsylvania's 7th District, we also have the Republican contender ahead. They would be keeping this seat. 99% of the votes in, still hasn't been called. And also Scott Perry in Pennsylvania's 10th district. We had him behind in the polls before November 5th, up to 9 points behind Janelle Stelson. But, Trump effect being in the ballot, seems like it has pushed Scott Perry over the finish line. Still hasn't been called. 99% of the votes counted thus far. Now, we also need to look at the race here in Iowa's 3rd and 1st district. Miller Meeks is keeping her seat as of now. 99% of the votes counted, defeating the Democratic candidate. And also here in Iowa's 3rd district, Republican candidate is ahead. There were some fears before November 5th Republicans were going to lose Iowa's 1st and 3rd district. Right now, as the exit polls stand, they're going to be keeping them. If we go then to the state of Arizona, we're still waiting for the final result in the senatorial race, but we can see here a very important district, Juan Cisco Manny in Arizona's 6th district. Just 10 minutes ago, when we checked the results, it was under 59%, and it was Kirsten Engel that was ahead. So we now can see the live changes and why the House balance of power is still not determined, because with 64% of the votes in, now Juan Cisco Manny retakes the lead in this important race in the state of Arizona. And then the most crucial ones, 5 of them that we can see in the state of California, still haven't been called. First of them is California's 13th, John Duarte, holding his ground. He's the incumbent. Democrats were expected to flip this seat, or at least they strategized that they needed to flip these 5 seats in the state of California. California's 22nd, Valadao, large Hispanic population in that district. We just heard from Dave in the Data Hub how Hispanic men flocked to Republicans this election cycle, and maybe that's what's giving the 10-point advantage with 56% of the votes counted. I want to also talk about here California's 27th district. Mike Garcia was behind in the polls before November 5th, but now with 67% of the votes in, he's ahead, holding his ground. Young Kim down here doing the same in California's 40th district. If we check, Tiffany, we still haven't had the results of Washington's 3rd district. It's expected to remain blue. This is a rematch from 2022. Marie Gluson compares against Joe Kent, but we still don't have those votes, 75%. And like that race we just saw in Arizona's 6th district, those who's leading can change right up to the very end. So going back to the House balance of power, Republicans holding to 204 seats. They need 218 for the majority, and they're defending a 222 majority that they currently have. So this is a Democrat are having to flip seats if they want to have any chance of flipping the House of Representatives and keeping any checks and balances on Republican control over Washington. Back to you, Tiffany.
All right, Luis, thanks for that breakdown. As we still wait to see who controls the House balance of power, let's bring it back in studio now to our guests. Javier, in the case of the House race in Arizona, we're still waiting for those numbers to come, and we're seeing those jump, flip-flop back and forth, kind of like what we were watching last night in Pennsylvania in terms of the presidential race, those numbers just on the knife's edge. When it comes to a state like Arizona, what issues do you see driving people to the polls to pick those candidates? The economy, the border, what issues are you seeing here?
Actually, both of those things, both the economy and the border, and specifically border security. I'm delighted to see that my friend Juan Cisco Manny, the Republican, is pulling ahead. You talk about a guy who's the epitome and the living embodiment of the American dream. Came here as a teenager, worked with his father in a car wash, got a scholarship to go intern in Washington, D.C., and is now a member of the United States Congress. Only in America could that happen. But Juan Cisco Manny, I'm delighted to see he's pulling ahead. I'm pulling for him. I just texted him. Arizona is a unique place. It's got a steeped history. It understands very well its relationship and dependency with Mexico and trade. That is their number one trade partner. And Arizona learned at the knee of, as I did, John McCain. And McCain masterfully managed the relationship. It's a conservative state, but understands fully that there is a dependency, a correlation that has more to do with the economic and commercial interests of both parties, Mexico and Arizona, for them to continue to thrive. At the same time, they're facing some real challenges when it comes to the cartels, when it comes to border security, when it comes to illegal immigrants coming through the state. So it's going to be a challenging time, but I think people like Juan Ciscomani that understand that dynamic and understand the interdependency that has to exist. That's the key to the future. It's people like that that truly get it, and it's beyond ideology. It's understanding the reality of the market they live in and how both of these cultures have to coexist.
And Cameron, you've run for Congress before. Give us a sense, when you're seeing those numbers on that knife's edge, what is each side feeling right now? What is the sense? Are they both writing up speeches, waiting to see? Give us a sense of that.
A lot of tension, a lot of staring at a screen and seeing what comes in and calling people. Did you get those reports? Did they come back accurately?
A little bit of praying.
A lot of praying, that's for sure. A lot of cold water and coffee and, nice little snacks to eat. I will say it is really unique being involved in a race as a candidate as opposed to being involved in it from the outside. But there is, again, you're talking about what was so eloquently explained earlier. You're talking about a balance of power to represent people. It's a value structure of ideals, and what you see here is the candidate, which generally is able to resonate and connect with people to show the goodness and decency that you'd want out of your elected official, will generally have, in essence, an ability to prevail. And so that's kind of what these races are structured by. Sometimes you can have things along the lines of, functional rhetoric and or, cutting tones, but at the end of the day, people want to vote for someone they like. Now, so it's an appeal to the voters, the constituents there. How can I get people to resonate with my message in a way that might be unique? Maybe they haven't heard an individual cross lines on this issue before, but if you explain it from a different perspective, you're going to get people who are willing to see it from a new lens. And so when you value people in such a way to break those lines, to talk about how, look, economically what we fight for with immigration, we want a secure border, but we have to ensure that trade is there. Why? Because an environment where all can profit and all can thrive lifts all vessels, lifts all boats, if you will. And so Ciscomani's been excellent in carrying that message, which is why in such a competitive district, he's been able to slightly come to that lead, which is not always expected.
And right now, let's go to NTD's Jack Bradley in Philadelphia. Jack, what is the general reaction on the ground in that key battleground state to the election results last night?
Well, we had a very big mixed bag of reactions. Just want to pan over here behind me to the City Hall building to show you where we are right now. In the heart of Philadelphia here, we ran into quite a mixed bag of voters, both Republicans and Democrats, and I also ran into many tourists. Now, the people I spoke to who were supporting Harris were very upset, of course, and mostly that they were worried for their future and about the next 4 years under Trump, a second term, about abortion rights and things like that. Now, as far as people who supported Trump, they're very hopeful for the future. I spoke to one gentleman who says that, as far as the presidency goes, he doesn't think so much can be done there. And it's not as important as some of the other races, more local governments. But let's take a look at what some people told me earlier.
It's disappointing I'm avoiding the internet today. I'm very concerned about the Roe v. Wade situation. More so than I was his last term. I think it's really scary that women are in danger everywhere and that abortion could be banned nationwide. I don't think the Democrats are necessarily that great either, but that was the main issue that really persuaded me to vote for Kamala. So, the Palestine issues were huge, and I think a lot of people I know chose to vote third party or not vote based on that, which I respect.
Well, I think that we needed a change in this country right now, and I think it's good that he won. I think it's going to be a big difference in the country.
And that manufacturing comes back, because manufacturing is down everywhere. So I'd like to see manufacturing come back, the economy get better, and interest rates go down, so I don't have to pay 7% for a house. I mean, that's what I hope, what every American hopes, I think.
I'm very not happy with the outcome. He's been very controversial, and those past 4 years that he was president, I didn't feel like he was up for the job.
Whenever we go to a country, we have to be in the country legally, so I can understand that. And
I feel like it's kind of like my country's fault that Mexicans have to go to a different country, to U.S. mainly, like illegally, because there's a lot of corruption, sadly, in Mexico. So United States is going to be great again.
So yeah, we can see a very mixed bag of reactions here, and a lot of strong reactions as the time goes on, and people just avoiding social media, like the First Lady we saw there, not really wanting to think about it too much, and people who very much strongly support Trump have a hopeful vision of the future, especially on the economy side. Back to you.
NTD's Jack Bradley, great reporting there live in Philadelphia. And next up, our reporter David Jung is on the ground in Atlanta, Georgia. He has reactions from local residents to Donald Trump's re-election. We'll be right back.
New to Medicare? Recently moved or losing coverage? Then let us help break it down for you. First up, we have Medicare Part A. Consider your hospital insurance as your safety net, covering inpatient hospital stays, skilled nursing facilities, hospice care, and some home health care. It's the help for your peace of mind, ensuring that you get the care you may need when you need it. Now let's talk about Medicare Part B, your medical insurance. This is your key to most preventative services, outpatient care and doctor visits, from flu shots to screenings. Part B, you're at the forefront of proactive health care. If you enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan, the plan may provide all of your Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B coverage, and it is designed with you in mind, providing a wide array of coverage options for personalized care. Review your Medicare coverage options, ensuring it aligns with your evolving healthcare needs, from flu shots to screenings. Call 800-939-1759. That's 800-939-1759.
Rated the best hearing aids of 2023 by Forbes, the Audien Atom 2 series offers superior sound quality and functionality for a fraction of the price. For just $189 a pair, the Atom 2 features 4 different hearing modes for all types of hearing loss. It packs crystal clear sound, a nearly invisible design, and is even rechargeable.
I actually like them better than my old $5,000 hearing aids. They're so comfortable, I forget I'm wearing them. And the sound is amazing.
The Atom Pro 2 is our smallest hearing aid yet, featuring advanced background noise cancellation, and is the world's first hearing aid with built-in UV cleaning that kills 99% of bacteria.
I could not believe how my hearing and life changed without seeing a doctor or having a hearing test.
Join over 500,000 happy customers today and get the hearing you deserve.
Call 1-800-455-5922 or go to audienhearing.com to get your pair of Audien hearing aids starting at just $189.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic MyPillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen size MyPillow for just $18.88. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
And welcome back to NTD's 2024 election analysis. We do have some breaking news for you. President Biden has released a statement, his first one since Trump's win last night. It's praising Harris and made no mention of Trump. The statement says Harris stepped up and led a historic campaign under extraordinary circumstances. Biden said selecting Harris as his running mate in 2020 was his best decision, and that her story represents the best of America's story. Biden's statement reads, quote, "She will continue the fight with purpose, determination, and joy. She will continue to be a champion for all Americans. Above all, she will continue to be a leader our children will look up to for generations to come as she puts her stamp on America's future." Biden has not appeared publicly since Trump's win, but he is expected to address the nation tomorrow. Former President Bill Clinton and former Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton also releasing a statement just moments ago reacting to the win of former President Trump. They write, quote, "We wish them well and hope they will govern for all of us." And in the meantime, NTD's David Jung is in Atlanta, Georgia with more. Thank you, David. What can you tell us?
Well, it was a relatively short election last night. The presidential race in Georgia was called at 1 a.m. and Georgians woke up this morning to the news that Donald J. Trump won the 2024 presidential race and flipped the state of Georgia back to red. I've talked to a few folks here in Gwinnett County, the second largest county just north of Atlanta, to get their reactions. Take a listen.
Very happy.
I'm very happy.
It's kind of expected.
And I think there were other Democrats that actually came over to the side of the Republicans because I think it was a very common sense approach to looking at immigration, looking at the economy. And so I think that if you want to say a unifying message, I believe that Trump had, I think that had a greater appeal to a broader number of people.
Not paying or taxes on overtime, you're not paying taxes on tips. Some of the things that he's doing for the common person, I think is people want a better life and they want responsibility in government. And we haven't had that in a very, very long time.
Not everyone is happy about Trump getting elected. Unfortunately, all of those who are not happy about the election results have declined to speak in front of a camera. Now, if you look at the data, Trump's victory in Georgia had a lot to do with a surge of turnout in solid red counties, while blue counties in Georgia remained more relatively static to 2020. Nonetheless, 3 counties between the city of Macon and Augusta did flip from blue to red. Overall, Georgia has had some very impressive record-setting stats for this election. A total turnout of 5.22 million voters. The shortest wait time to vote, on average, just 47 seconds to check in at polls. Most people were able to get in and out just 5 minutes. They also had the shortest time needed to count the ballots and report the results in the state's history. Back to you.
Thank you, David. And now back to our in-studio guests. Cameron, I want to get your thoughts on the global implications of a new presidency for former President Trump. How are key allies likely to react to this? How is this going to affect relationships with, say, NATO and the EU?
Really excellent question. I will say I worked at the State Department for 5 years, again, during the latter elements of the Obama presidency and into the Trump presidency. I will tell you that the rhetoric, while it was more controversial at times under Trump's leadership, there was a sense of respect that our allies and even our adversaries provided to us. I traveled extensively in the Middle East and many other regions, even parts of Eastern and Western Africa. I mean, places which are very unique and have completely, differentiating, cultural practices, and the appearance of wanting to show good faith and respect to the American diplomatic envoy was very, very different under Trump than it was under Obama. I suspect that we'll see that return. Now, since 2016, Trump has obviously gained more enemies overseas internationally in a very unique and compelling way because he speaks his mind and he's comes across as very sincere with his tone, even if it's not always well received. I will tell you, though, from a NATO perspective, I'm actually really glad you mentioned that, because NATO was a very controversial element where he was trying to broker to ensure that NATO partners were contributing more, and he effectively achieved that. So at first, NATO was seen as hostile to Trump, but they actually came out to publicly praise him because they allowed his pressure and rhetoric allowed the NATO supporting allies to actually contribute the amounts of which they were contractually obligated. You have the 607 agreements and many others that now, all of a sudden, our foreign counterparts were contributing more in their national defense. I just came from an Army USA conference recently where all the Scandinavian nations are talking about the need for a more robust and more critical infrastructure for their defense posture. That came on the coattails of a Trump presidency.
Gerard?
Well, I think Donald Trump is a known entity. Foreign leaders know what to expect, and sometimes that's the unexpected, but he has been there, he has done that, and he has made many he has made progress. Look at the Abraham Accords. He pulled something off in the Middle East that no one else has accomplished, not even with Oslo. So we do know that he is someone who can, when he wants to, get things done on the international scene. He can bring together countries that are allies of the United States and maintain those allianceships. We do hear a lot of rhetoric, and that rhetoric doesn't always make people happy. But at the end of the day, he is someone who has had that experience of being president. He knows the people. He knew the people, some of the people, as a businessman. And he has maintained a steady helm on foreign policy. So we know what to expect. Foreign leaders know what to expect. And I think we will see more continuation of developing good ties with countries in the Middle East especially. And we will see the continued pressure on China, on Russia. Despite what people say that he is best friends with Putin, he is not. He has been tough with Russia, and he continues to be so. So we can expect a continuation of a lot of the Trump policies, but also what we've seen with Biden. It's not going to be a massive change.
And I think as it relates to NATO, one thing that I have to say that I admire is that he's less concerned with being popular than getting his agenda. And to me, that speaks volumes with what he's willing to do and the personal attacks he's willing to take to get things done. And as it relates to NATO, all he ever wanted was for all the other players to pay their fair share. There's nothing unreasonable about that. All the demagoguery that happened around him and everything else that the hype that went around it, it all began with, hey, listen, I'm not going to keep paying everybody else's share. I'm not going to do that to my country. You guys start paying your fair share, then I'm willing to play. But if you're not, then I'm not playing. I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to ask.
So Theron, all the social issues aside here that affect Americans domestically, do you think that Trump's foreign policy is something that he could build a coalition around with Democrats?
I think we're vulnerable. I think people that are not Republican have a lot of questions around how President-elect Trump is going to deal with foreign leaders, whether they are allies or adversaries. We want to know what those relationships look like. There are questions around his relationship with Putin. There are questions around the relationship with Netanyahu. And the American people deserve to know, ultimately, however any aid is spent, whether it's defense funding, whether it's arms, or whatever it is, those are our taxpayer dollars. And we want to know that they're being well spent in serving us, or at least going to a cause that we support. And so that's going to be a message that President-elect Trump is going to have to explain to us.
Really excellent topics. And if I can add a comment there, what we saw with President Trump when it comes to foreign aid and spending, many times he represented the fiduciary responsibility of what you should see in a commander-in-chief and saying, we'll engage in this trade agreement, but you're going to pay for the resources. You're going to pay for the vessels. You're going to pay for the ability to produce this commodity that we've perfected in the United States, to expand on your military infrastructure. It was never a free lunch, so to speak. There were expectations and contingencies. Even loans and foreign investments that were made, for example, in places like Somalia. Rex Tillerson, when he went over to negotiate on behalf of the Trump presidency, and again, I was there when it happened, was very pragmatic about what are we getting strategically from this investment, and is it worthwhile so that we can be justified before the taxpayer in knowing that their resources are spent diligently. I will say that that was a common prerogative. I do think the unique thing about Donald Trump and his coalition with RFK Jr. and many who are more independent and or slightly libertarian is unique in that he empathizes with people in a way that you might not expect. His comments about the war in Ukraine were very simple. I just want the killing to stop. There's a huge majority of Americans and really people in the international community that hear the empathy of that position and think, that seems pragmatic, that seems reasonable. Maybe you can't hold every geographical territory exactly as they were prior to the conflict, but how do we stop the death? How do we stop the mayhem? And so I think it'll be very interesting to see how he's able to amass that panel. Pulling Tulsi Gabbard into his team, she's a very intricate part of his transition team, as well as with what he hopes to achieve in his administration. That's a very unique perspective. Again, it goes very contrary to the neoconservative movement, large, huge federal government resources and infrastructure and efforts overseas, into a more reticent and a more balanced approach, using a bit more restraint. Time will tell, but I think that the coalition he's formed now is very broad and very unique and very focused on ensuring that American policies exercised overseas are actually benefiting Americans, or we should just stay neutral.
Foreign policy and geopolitics, a lot more to get into here. But first, coming up, we'll go to NTD's Arlene Richards at the Legal Hub. Arlene.
When we come back, I'm going to tell you the many ways that the federal cases against Trump could be dismissed. Don't go away.
Voted the best hearing aids of 2024. The Audien Adam 2 series offers superior sound quality and functionality for a fraction of the price. For just $189 a pair, the Adam 2 features 4 different hearing modes for all types of hearing loss. It packs crystal clear sound, a nearly invisible design, and is even rechargeable.
I actually like them better than my old $5,000 hearing aids. They're so comfortable, I forget I'm wearing them. And the sound is amazing.
The Adam Pro 2 is our smallest hearing aid yet, featuring advanced background noise cancellation, and is the world's first hearing aid with built-in UV cleaning that kills 99% of bacteria.
I could not believe how my hearing and life changed without seeing a doctor or having a hearing test.
Join over 500,000 happy customers today and get the hearing you deserve.
Call 1-800-433-6359 or go to audionhearing.com to get your pair of Audien hearing aids starting at just $189.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Legal Help Center. This is where we have professionals standing by to answer your questions regarding personal injury. So if you've been injured in an accident that was not your fault, like a car accident or a slip and fall, we can help. As a matter of fact, we are here to help. So take that first step and call the number on your screen right now. We have legal professionals standing by to answer your questions. They'll tell you if you have a case and how much your case is potentially worth. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Gina Belich, here with TV anchor and spokesman Tom Mustin. So Tom, you've been in television for over 20 years. You've participated in a number of big events. Tell everyone watching at home what makes the Legal Help Center so special and what it means for you to be here with us in the studio.
Well, Gina, first let me thank you for having me join you here today. Now, as far as who should call in right now, the answer is anyone who's been injured in an accident that was not their fault, because when you give us a call, you're going to speak with a live person, not some automated greeting or computer message, but an actual person who's ready to help. You'll receive a free consultation. You can get all your questions answered, and more importantly, find out how much your case is potentially worth.
Now, this is a service to you, the viewers, offering you a free consultation and getting you access to legal help. So if you've been injured in an accident that was not your fault, or you know someone recently in an accident, give us a call right now. You'll speak with a live agent, not some automated greeting, but an actual person right now who's ready to help you.
Like Gina said, if you've been injured in an accident, like a car accident or a slip and fall, the team is available to help. So take that first step. We have agents available for you right now. They'll answer any questions you have, let you know how much your case is potentially worth. Take care, everyone, and thank you for watching.
And welcome back to NTD's 2024 election analysis. President-elect Donald Trump is heading back to the White House in less than 3 months. But what happens to his federal criminal cases? Our legal correspondent Arlene Richards is at the Legal Hub with details on what could happen and when. Break it down for us, Arlene.
So President-elect Trump actually is still involved in 2 federal cases that have been filed against him by special counsel Jack Smith. And those cases are the election interference case filed in Washington, D.C., and the classified documents case filed in Florida. Now, the classified documents case has been dismissed by the judge, but Smith is appealing it. Now, there are 3 ways that these cases could be dismissed. First of all, Smith could voluntarily dismiss the cases along with the Department of Justice, and this would be based on a policy that says no sitting president can be prosecuted. Or they could wait and let Trump's attorneys be the ones to ask for the dismissal. Now, this would put the responsibility on Trump rather than on Smith. Or maybe Trump himself could pardon himself. And that's something that's kind of up in the air. It's not clear. It would be unprecedented. But as a sitting president, he may be able to pardon himself, although it has not been legally determined how that would happen. If he can do it, then that would mean that all of his legal charges would be eliminated. Now, that would not necessarily apply, well, that wouldn't apply to the state charges, as this only applies to federal charges. Now, speaking of pardoning, there's also another issue of pardoning that could be happening, and that is the January 6th individuals, the individuals that were involved in the January 6th breach. Now, there were over 1,500 people that have already been charged. And just recently, one of those individuals asked his court, or asked the judge, to delay a hearing that was coming up because he cited promises made by President-elect Trump during his campaign that he would pardon January 6 individuals. Now, Trump said on September 2022 in an interview, "We'll be looking very, very seriously at full pardons." Now, if he is going to pardon them, there are an unlimited number of ways that he could do this, including pardoning all of the offenders that have already been convicted and are in prison. He could also end the court-ordered supervision that's been ordered by the courts, or lastly, he could end any ongoing prosecutions. Back to you.
All right, Arlene, thanks for those breakdowns on the legal cases against Trump.
And setting aside all political differences, what would Americans like to see achieved in a second Trump administration? NTD's Sam Wong was out in the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the voters.
What's your reaction to the election result last night?
We're very happy. We like the change that Donald Trump promised this country. Strong borders, better economy, America first, strong military.
Just wow. The landslide was a surprise.
Very happy. Yeah, it shows that our democratic process works.
I'm super glad it's over, and I hope that we can all come together as a country.
I'm really disheartened in the results of the election. I honestly and truly believe from my heart that we're missing out. We're going to be missing out on some of our democracy.
And I went to a DC pub, restaurant, and I could gauge straight away that the mood wasn't good. It was pretty dour, which for me was very good news indeed.
I'm initially from Australia. This is my third election that I've been here for, but this is the first as a citizen. But unfortunately, it didn't go the way I wanted. I live in Florida.
When we want to see the betterment of all society, we need to empower the centrists and the moderates, and that's exactly what we saw. I think that we've had too many factions within the Democrat Party and within my own liberal and progressive movements that have gone too far.
If you were to set aside all political differences, what would you like to see done in the upcoming administration?
Well, the number one thing that I think can resonate universally, because there's obviously a lot of divisive issues, is protecting the environment.
Just put his team together, get the cabinet that he's looking for, and get to work. I mean, we've got a lot of things to address.
I also love the concept of Elon Musk coming in and looking at how do we save money and cut out some of the fat.
I would like to see the borders under control.
I would just like to see positive things instead of negative tweets.
Donald can communicate with Mr. Putin as he has done in the past.
More safety for the American Jewish population. We've seen American Jews being targeted, according to the FBI, the ADL, and police departments across the country in major cities.
Both sides of the aisle need to come together and work as one group, because they're all pulling the same direction. We'll get a lot of stuff done that's going to make our country better.
In the sight of God, we are all equals, and we need to put aside the political parties because we are Americans.
And bringing our discussion back in studio, Javier, let's have a discussion here about, first of all, NTD's Sam Wong does a great job going out to the National Mall and really getting his finger on the pulse of all different perspectives. As you can see, Americans have a variety of opinions, and they still do. With that said, one of those opinions was talking about feeling happy that Elon Musk is being brought into the discussion. How do you think social media impacted the results of this election?
Oh, it absolutely did. And having a personality like Elon Musk play the role he did, like it or not, the scheme he came up with, and getting people excited to potentially win $1 million. It's old world craftsmanship, and these guys know how to drum up interest and excitement. At the end of the day, like him or not, and there's some puts and takes when it comes to Elon Musk, the man has proven time and again that he knows how to run a business. Is he unorthodox? Yes. Does he do things that sometimes are off-putting? Yes. But has he been successful? Yes. And I can't help but think that when you bring business leaders and thinkers that know how to get things done, and you put them in governments, ultimately that government runs more efficiently, more effectively. In the long run, it benefits all Americans.
Darren?
I am not an Elon Musk fan. I do not like how he bombarded my hometown. He is monopolizing our power grid, our water access. I think there is something to be said by someone who has made a name and a business for themselves and been very successful doing that. But how has that trickled down to the average American? Who has he apprenticed, right? Who has he taught his process? And so when we have people that are positioned in this way, I look for how they give back to the community. I look for who their proteges are. I look for who else they're showing this is a pathway that worked for me, it can work for you too, and making that a tangible thing. I haven't seen that from him, and so he just looks like a billionaire who escapes taxes really easily, which is something to be said for a lot of billionaires. We want people to pay their fair share so that things are done equitably. And I think if he was better about that and also didn't engage in the rhetoric, both he and President-elect Trump both have social media platforms that they use to their benefit. If I had the type of money and I had a social media platform, I might do the same thing, but I'd be a lot more thoughtful. But I think overall, social media played a huge part in these elections. And I think the American government understood that too, which is why we're in the kind of conundrum we are with TikTok now, which is subject to no longer be in existence for us as users in America come January 2025, unless an agreement is reached. So.
And TikTok raises a very interesting discussion point. To Theron's point, what do you make of the future of TikTok?
Well, that's very much an open question because Donald Trump has said different things about TikTok. So whether he wants to go forward and find a way to ban it or to require China to give up control, it remains to be seen. I think that what we have seen is that he understands the problems that TikTok has inherited to the US, that it is foreign influence, that it is communist Chinese government has access to American data. But more than that, that it's also a corrupting influence on the next generation. People are getting news, people are getting information from TikTok, and that's not necessarily accurate news, that's not necessarily truthful news, and that's not necessarily beneficial to the American democracy. So when you combine those two factors, I do think Trump will take some action on TikTok, but whether it's a ban or whether it's requiring that its owners dispossess China of its control, that remains to be seen.
TikTok also played a role in, the border crisis, whether that's TikTok or China's version Douyin, with step-by-step guides for Chinese immigrants to illegally enter the southern border and other areas, the poorest parts of the border. Cameron, from your time in the Department of Homeland Security, we heard from one of the voters there at the National Mall that her biggest issue is making sure the border is secured. Given the current state we are in, where there have been anywhere from 10 to 20 million, immigrants coming across, many of them illegally. There's also about 2 million gotaways that we don't know about. We don't know where they are, the record number on the terror watch list. How will a Trump presidency handle that and bring it back to a state of a secure border?
Great question, and I think that was on the topic of most people's minds. I actually think that some of the reflection of the influence of the huge Hispanic turnout supporting President Trump was, in an odd way, very unified with his message of ensuring that immigration should be able to be conducted, but it has to be legal. It has to have proper vetting. We have to know who these individuals are so that we don't just ingest them into communities without any understanding of security proclivities, gang involvement. I will say many parts of rural America are being decimated by the intrusion of crime. Criminal syndicates. You mentioned TikTok. Some of the great men and women that I worked with at Border Patrol would show me videos every single day of individuals showing how on TikTok and other mediums to make your way past the border, videos bragging about how much satchels they would bring, how much drugs, how much money, bringing weapons. It really is quite remarkable how those tools are used. President Trump's opposition to the TikTok ban that was proposed was not actually a proposition about banning TikTok. He had concerns about the authority specifically being granted to the president. That specific legislative action put a lot of authority and determination solely in the hands of the chief executive, and he felt that that was inappropriate and should be more balanced with the legislature. And that's kind of why he came out with a more public position on the recent ban that was eventually voted and adopted by the House. A very unique perspective, but he has changed his mind a bit back and forth. And so I think with Trump, with the immigration issue and with his position on some of these arguable matters like TikTok and many others, he's trying to find out what are the key issues that Americans feel. And at the end of the day, knowing that you're safe in your community, knowing that you have an ability to thrive, take your kids to the school, go out as a family for dinner and things like that, and not be heavily influenced in crime. J.D. Vance had a wonderful interview where he went back and forth with CNN about specifically an apartment complex that was taken over by migrants. Most Americans see that and they think, wait a second, it shouldn't have been any. Yes, it was only 1 or 2 apartment complexes, but the fact that we're having the conversation about apartment complexes being taken over by migrant gangs is inherently defining the problem. I will say, seeing the southern border, Nogales, Yuma, so many different locations, we have never seen the numbers that we've seen now. We are overwhelming our resources.
We do have an update for everybody. Trump's campaign has accepted President Biden's invitation to the White House. President Biden calling Trump earlier today to congratulate him. Trump's statement says he looks forward to that meeting and that it will take place shortly. And still to come, NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar takes to the streets of Brazil to bring us reaction to Trump's victory. Stay tuned for that after the break. Sorry, Javier.
NATOpath were driven to improve the lives of people by providing highly effective supplements that solve common health problems and support optimal health. This is what being on the path is all about. Visit getnativepath.com/NTD for your special offer.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Abused youth often feel safer on the street. Now, more than ever, that's the most dangerous place of all. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming, and no young person is ever turned away. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month to help a young person. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Your gift will show them they're loved. Homeless young people are afraid and alone with nowhere else to turn.
You want to know that there's somewhere you can go that's safe. So the Covenant House did that for us.
Please call now with your gift of $19 a month. We'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. Please don't wait. Your gift is the lifeline a young person needs now. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org. Thank you for saving precious lives.
When it comes to disasters and emergencies, it's not a matter of if, but when.
I'm relying on luck, but who knows if it'll be on my side.
Let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Take control at ready.gov/olderadults.
Most of the people here in Brazil pay close attention to the elections in the United States. Now that's first of all because they're both huge countries, right, Brazil and the US, but also because a lot of the food Americans eat on a day-to-day basis comes from here, from Brazil, meat, for example. But at the same time, because of that, Brazil's economy depends on those exports to the US, at least to some degree. So it's a give-and-take relationship, meaning the elections in one country can, to some degree, affect people in the other country.
It was a good choice. It's an independent country. It can choose their leaders, and I think he is a good choice.
So do the people agree? Will the election in the US affect Brazil and other countries around the globe?
I think so. The strongest power around the globe affects all countries, not just Brazil, all of Latin America.
Given how strong of a power the US is, it affects Brazil a lot. Although I will say that our relationship with the US was better when Trump and Bolsonaro were in office.
Just like in the US, abortion is a major topic for many women in Brazil. Abortion has been illegal in the country since the 1940s.
For me, the US was a reference for legalization. Now they're going backwards. So it was an example, but it won't be anymore. Now we have less of a chance to move forward.
Women should have the right to choose what to do with their own bodies, independent from certain religious beliefs or other reasons.
Do we have the right to do what we want? Yes, but that is placing huge future loads on the family system, including on the next children. So I think there are other ways that prevent getting pregnant before there is the need for abortion. So I think abortion is absurd, and I stand with those who are against it.
One of the people I spoke with, a lawyer from the south of Brazil, tells me he hopes Trump can bring changes to Brazil.
I think freedom has been undercut with our current government, and Trump might bring a relief so we can get our freedom back.
Brazil's Supreme Court banned Twitter after Elon Musk reportedly didn't comply with demands from the High Court. Musk alleged the demands were illegal and amounted to censorship. The tech entrepreneur might now become part of the next Trump administration.
I think Elon Musk will be a great help for Trump in the area of communication. He's a great entrepreneur, a great businessman, and I think he will bring good results.
Trump will, of course, take over the role as president for the second time. Can he improve compared to his first term?
I think he has more power now, with the majority in the Senate, and he won't be dealing with a pandemic.
Republicans won the majority in the Senate on Wednesday. They could also stay in power in the House, but it's too early to call as of Wednesday afternoon. Reporting in Brazil, Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
And we just want to say thank you to all of our panelists once again, Javier Palomares, Theron Bond, Gerard Felitti, and Cameron Hamilton. Really great to have you all here, bringing your perspectives. And that does bring us to the end of our coverage tonight.
We do want to thank all of you so much for joining us throughout last night and today.
I'm Steve Lance.
And I'm Tiffany Meier.
And from all of us at NTD News, have a good night.
Will radical